Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Was a Demon and Got Trained by Mirko to be #1 Hero Part 2. Before we start, please go support PresidentThanos for writing that awesome fanfic. Licensing Exam PT3. Izuku, Bakugo, and Tsu were left by themselves as they waited for the rest of their classmates to arrive. As they were walking, Izuku spied a blonde girl in the distance. Her hero costume was a black tracksuit and a yellow haori with white triangles. They made eye contact and Izuku immediately regretted it as she sprinted over. Midoriya, hi, I'm Zenika Agatsuma, please let me date you. Izuku. Ra? Izuku started backing up. He glanced to the side just to see Bakugo and Tsu trying not to laugh and gave them a glare. Agatsuma. Oh, look at those eyes, you're so handsome. Izuku then turned and started running, though the girl's lightning quirk let her keep up easily. It wasn't until she took a metal rabbit's foot to the stomach that she stopped. Izuku then hid behind Rumi, who had just arrived. Rumi, stay away from him. Agatsuma got back up. Agatsuma yelling, and who are you? Both Rumi's and Izuku's faces went deadpan. Rumi, really? You know who he is but not me. I'm Mirko, #5 hero, his girlfriend. Rumi leaned forward and glared at Agatsuma. The blonde girl's gaze then landed on Izuku, who was still hiding behind Rumi and nodding. Agatsuma. I guess it's a competition then. He will be mine. Mark my words. The girl walked away with a huff. Izuku then let out a sigh of relief and came out from behind Rumi. He then pulled out his notebook. Izuku, thanks. She wouldn't leave me alone. Rumi chuckled. Rumi. I saw. Guess you got yourself your first crazy fan babe. Get ready cause there's gonna a shitload more where that came from. Izuku, yay. Why are you here? Rumi sighed. Rumi. The HUC members wouldn't let you near them without me here. While you're popular, people are scared of you too. Izuku, HUC? Rumi. Yeah, HUC. The Help Us company. They train people to act injured and in trouble for heroes to practice. They're also a part of the exam. Did you really think the exam would be only fighting? Huh. Izuku, bet you did too. She looked away and grumbled. Mera. All passing participants have now gathered. Yawn. Izuku looked around to see the whole class had passed. He then grabbed Rumi's wrist and pulled her over with him. All the students who passed the first portion of the exam turned to face the tired man on the stage. Mera. Now that I have your attention, I can describe the second portion of this exam. As you all know, there's more to being a hero than fighting. You must also save citizens. Yawn. It was then explosions could be heard going off. Mera. That yawn is what you will be doing. HUC members have been trapped underneath rubble and on the other side of fallen bridges. This portion will be graded on a demerit system, meaning you will lose points with no hope of gaining them back. If you score below a 50, then you will fail. Now go. Yawn. The room then opened up once more to reveal the areas the students were just in, now destroyed. Izuku and Rumi immediately took off, everyone else following after them. A large number went to the city environment, so Izuku, and by extension Rumi, went to the factory. They stopped and stood on a roof. After a few seconds they both heard a sound. They looked at each other, nodded, and ran towards it. When they reached it, they found their way blocked by a large pipe which was too heavy for them to move, even together. Izuku, Ra. HUC member yelling. Help me please. Izuku, Izuku was looking for a way around the pipe, but he couldn't find one. He was beginning to panic when he remembered something. Back during the Kamino Ward battle, he grew in size when he demonized. Maybe he could shrink. He began to focus, remembering the feeling of how he grew. It felt like expanding his gut, but all over, so what if he sucked in instead? As he did so, he could feel himself getting shorter and shorter, his hero costume feeling heavier as it didn't shrink with him. Once he was finished, he was only 3 feet 7 inches. 109.2 centimeters. He walked over to the pipe and was now able to squeeze under. Rumi. Ugo Izuku. He sent a smile her way as he disappeared behind the pipe. He saw and approached the HUC member, who looked up at him. HIC member. Oh, it's the demon. The hate in her voice was thick, but Izuku shrugged it off. He had an exam to pass after all. Izuku. Ah. He took out a roll of bandages he had in his costume and wrapped up a few fake cuts. He then picked up the HUC member and carried her back out, sliding her underneath the pipe, and Rumi dragged her out the rest of the way. Rumi, you're all right in our hands? Izuku heard her as he crawled back out and could tell she was forcing it. Izuku grew back, placed his hand on her shoulder, and gave her a smile. Izuku then picked up the HUC member, and they took off. Though the member was clearly hating being carried by Izuku. Eventually they made it to the evacuation center other students had set up and passed the HUC member to another student. Rumi. Good job, now let's get some more of these goo. She was then blasted away with a torrent of wind. Izuku and a few others looked towards the source to find Yorashi. He then turned his gaze to Izuku, an angry and hateful look on his face. Yorashi yelling. Get away from him, Mirko, he's dangerous. Izuku, realizing a fight near the evacuation center wasn't good, turned and ran. Yorashi and a few others gave chase. As Izuku ran, he could see Rumi, Agatsuma, and Bakugo starting to catch up to them. Once they were far enough away from any other students and HUC members, Izuku stopped and turned around to face his pursuers. Izuku yelling Ra. Yorashi landed, Shindo ran up beside him, and a few others Izuku didn't know appeared. Shindo. There's nowhere to go now, demon. None of your friends are here to help you. Agatsuma yelling. Actually, we are. A flash of lightning blitzed through some of the group and a white blur bowled through the others. Then Bakugo landed in front of the still standing Yorashi. Rumi landed next to Izuku and Agatsuma stood in the middle. Bakugo. You better be able to tell us why you're chasing Izuku. Yorashi yelling. Why? Because he's a demon type, he's probably using you all to look innocent. Bakugo sighed. Bakugo. Not the right answer, win for brains. He raised his palm to Yorashi. Bakugo, yelling, blast away. He sent the most powerful yet non-lethal explosion to the other boy's chest, knocking him out and sending him flying. Bakugo. Lightning girl, take care of the rest. Agatsuma just nodded and charged forward using her quirk. The rest were out in mere seconds. Izuku, however, noticed something was wrong. Rumi would usually dive and head first into battle, but she didn't this time. Izuku dragged her off to the side and took out his notebook. Izuku, what's going on? You seem like you're hesitant to fight. Rumi looked shocked that he picked up on OT for a second but quickly regained her composure and sighed. Rumi. I'll tell you back in our room, okay? It's a bit personal. Izuku nodded. Izuku, okay. Mera. All HUC members have been rescued, please return to the locker rooms, change, and follow your teacher. Izuku and Rumi walked away towards where the others started walking. Next step. Izuku, Rumi, and the class had finally reached the hall once more, now in their school uniforms. Mera then walked on stage and stood at the microphone. Mera. Yon, I hope you all understand why we had to streamline the numbers this year. With the fall of All Might and rise of crime rates, yon, we need the best of the best to have their licenses. But do not fret, there's still the next exam, which will be held with the previous regulations. Now. He pressed a button and a hologram of those who passed appeared above him. Izuku searched for his name, but it wasn't up there, though he did notice an empty slot. Mera. These are those who passed. Yon, a paper detailing your performances will be passed around shortly. Now, if you don't mind, I'm gonna go find a corner to sleep in. With that, the man walked off stage and men and women in suits started passing out papers. Ms. Jorkaki then made her way down the row Izuku was in before handing him his paper, which had 5,100 points, which confused him. Izuku. Ah? Ms. Jorkaki. Yes, you passed Midoriya. After the incident during the second portion, we thought it best to hide your name. Don't worry, you'll still get your license. The HUC member you rescued and the Hero Commission spectators took all your points. But after seeing your intelligence with leading the fight away from the civilians, Mera personally cut the deduction in half, making it so you only lost 50 points. She gave him a smile and continued down the row. Izuku smiled and looked at the paper, tears beginning to roll down his face. He looked to Rumi, who gave him a loving smile and put her hand on his shoulder. After a few minutes, Mera once again spoke up. Mera. Now, those of you who passed, we will now be taking your photo for the licenses. Please follow Mr. Hiroti here. The rest of you may either stay in here to socialize or go to your buses. Izuku looked over to the man Mera pointed out and walked over, confident nothing would happen as all of his classmates were with him. After half an hour, all the pictures were done and the licenses were printed. Izuku walked out of the building, hero costume case in one hand and hero license in the other. Rumi walked over and sat next to him. Rumi, you excited? He nodded. Rumi, you should be. You finally get to do actual hero work instead of breaking the law, though your insistence on doing the right thing no matter what is pretty badass. And hot. Izuku blushed and smiled before pulling out the notebook. Izuku, yeah, I can finally work with you. Rumi's smile wavered for just a second before intensifying. Rumi, not really, Aizu. Izuku looked saddened. Izuku, why not? Rumi, don't worry, you'll like the reason, I promise. She ruffled his hair a little and stood up. Rumi, now let's go, we've waited long enough. Izuku stood up and started walking towards the bus when she stopped him by grabbing his shoulder. Rumi, nah. You have your license now, which means we can both legally run faster than the bus last one there has to do the dishes. With that, she took off, leaving Izuku in the dust. He smiled, crouched down, and took off after her. For the next hour they were racing back to UA. Sometimes Izuku would be in the lead while others Rumi would be. They were evenly matched in speed. Once they reached the Path to Heights Alliance, they both kicked it up a notch. Rumi started running on all fours, something she would never admit was faster, and Izuku made cuts at the bottom of his feet to use exploding blood as propulsion. Needless to say, the 1A dorm building needed new front doors. After cleaning up a little, both Izuku and Rumi headed to their dorm room. Izuku was sat on the bed while Rumi stood in front of him, holding something behind her back. Izuku. Ra? Rumi. So Izuku. This is about why I didn't fight and why you won't be able to work with me. Izuku pulled out his phone. Izuku, what is it? Are you okay? Is it some kind of injury? She smiled and shook her head at his worry-full questions. Rumi. I'm fine, Izuku. You know how well I can kick life's ass. This is different. I said it was personal earlier, and that's true, but it's also personal to you. It affects both of us, Izuku. Izuku, what is it? She walked forward, bent down, took his phone, set it down, gave him a kiss, and placed the object she was holding in his hand. She stood back up and took a couple steps back, a smile plastered on her face. Izuku, now coming out of the stun she put him in, looked down and saw a small white stick in his hand. He noticed a small window on the thicker part, with 2 vertical red lines. Izuku looked up at her, then back down, repeatedly changing his gaze's target. Finally he stopped at her, tears of joy sliding down his cheeks. Izuku. Ra? Rumi nodded and stepped forward. Rumi. Yes, Aizu, I'm pregnant. You're going to be a dad. He lunged forward and wrapped his arms around her in a hug which she gladly returned. The next step of their relationship had just started. News and fight. Izuku and Rumi were both in Recovery Girl's office one morning. Aizawa had allowed Izuku to skip part of class due to the visit concerning Rumi's pregnancy, which he gave Izuku one of his famous shit-eating grins while telling him. Now Rumi was sitting on a bed with a small yet noticeable bump on her stomach. Izuku was standing next to her, both facing Recovery Girl. RG. Okay, I have some good news and more good news. Izuku. Ra. Rumi. Yeah, what is it? RG. The first thing is that you're having twins, Usujiyama. Rumi looked shocked, then turned to Izuku and gave him a big kiss on the cheek. He giggled a little with a large smile on his face. RG. The next is that due to your rabbit quirk and the regenerative capabilities of Midoriya's cells, these 2 babies will be ready to come out in just 2 months. It seems they require you to eat less, as if they didn't you'd be spending almost all your time eating. Other than that, they appear healthy. Izuku's smile widened some more as he looked at Rumi's belly, his pink eyes telling both Recovery Girl and Rumi just how excited he was. Rumi grabbed his hand and put it on the bump. Rumi, we're gonna do great, Izu. We're gonna hit these kids with good parenting so hard they won't even know what hit them. She smiled and gave him a kiss. All of a sudden the door was kicked in, revealing a muscular, blonde-haired upperclassman. You Midoriya? Izuku nodded. I'm Mirio Togata, and we're gonna fight while you're gonna be with the rest of your class but still counts. Oh, Mirko, wanna join? She shook her head. Rumi. Not now. Togata. Oh well. Now come on, Midoriya. He grabbed Izuku by the wrist and dragged him out. Just before he left, Izuku waved bye to Rumi, who smiled and waved back. Then he was gone. Recovery Girl spoke up again. RG. You really love him, don't you? Rumi. Yeah. So? Recovery Girl chuckled and shook her head. RG. Oh, nothing. Just that you beat every guy who asked you out when you went here. I should know, as I had to heal them all. Rumi. Well, they weren't good enough. RG. And he is? Rumi. Yes. Recovery Girl just shook her head. RG. I suggest you get back to your room now. Remember to take it easy. Rumi. Yeah, I know. Thanks for this, Recovery Girl. If I went to a normal hospital, the whole country would know before a doctor saw me. RG. It's no problem. Now go. Rumi nodded and left. The class wasn't doing well at all. Over half had already been defeated by their upperclassman Mirio Togata. Izuku was standing in the center. He had already figured out Togata's tactic, strike and retreat. He was able to slip into the floor for his retreat, and he phased through his opponent's guards. So Izuku made a counter-strategy. Izuku ripped into his skin, drenching himself in blood. Off on the sidelines some others stood. Heido. What's he doing? Is he crazy? Todoroki. No, he's being smart. He can ignite his blood, so he's using Togata's strategy against him. Heido. Oh, that's why I recognize him. He's that demon boy, right? Why wasn't he in class? Todoroki. Yes, he's the one with the demon-type quirk. I don't know why he wasn't here earlier, though. Amajiki. Heido, just watch, please. If you had been paying attention, then you'd see by his actions that Midori is the first one to figure out Mirio's quirk. Heido. Alright, fine. Back in the fight, it had gotten worse. Now only 2 students were left standing, Izuku being one of them. Curiously, Togata hadn't gone for him yet, but Izuku would come to him if he wouldn't. Togata exited near Bakugo and was about to hit him, but then he heard something. Izuku Ra. Just then Izuku rocketed over, using his natural speed and some blood on the bottom of his feet as propulsion. He caught Togata's hand, covering it in blood, and ignited it, causing Togata to lose focus. Once that happened, he received an explosion to the chest which launched him back. Bakugo, yelling. Kamikaze style, bell rush. With this technique he used both his hands and feet to move at near the speed of sound, though he couldn't control it well. With this burst of speed he blitzed Togata to deal 1 punch, but the older boy had already recovered and activated his quirk. Togata. Oh, pretty fast, not fast enough though. He was distracted, which allowed Izuku to wrap him in a blood whip and launch him into the air. Togata, oh fun. Bakugo, yelling, AP shot. Togata turned his head permeable as Bakugo's ranged attack went through it. Togata. Nice aim, let's finish this. He went into the floor and almost immediately popped up by Bakugo and kicked him into the floor, knocking him out. He then looked at Izuku, smiled, and raised his hand. Togata. I give up. Heido. But why? Togata. Simple, he beat me. Not only has he set up the perfect defense against me, the only way to stop him is to snap his neck, which I don't want to do. He walked over and shook Izuku's hand. The class then all collectively walked into the locker rooms to change, though Izuku spent an extra half hour to get as much blood out as possible in the shower. Ryukyu's visit. Just a few hours after the class fought Togata, they walked into the dorms. All of them, minus Izuku, collapsed onto nearby pieces of furniture, as they had all still been feeling the effects of the upperclassmen's blows to their guts. Instead, Izuku walked over to where Rumi was, shrunk, and hopped into her lap. Rumi. Well now, who do you think you are? My kids aren't due for 2 more months. Who do you think you're fooling, babe? Izuku pouted. Izuku. Rah. He pulled his phone out. Izuku, practice makes perfect, Rumi. She chuckled. Rumi. You're right, but I'd rather my boyfriend not look like more of a brat than he already is. Especially not with some on the way. Bakugo. What? The actual Buck? The couple whipped their heads around to look at the blonde boy, whose body was quickly becoming purple from how hard he was kicked into the floor earlier that day. Rumi. You heard nothing. Bakugo received a small glare for Izuku, which told him the same thing. Bakugo. You know. I think I was just hearing things. Rumi. Damn right you were. We'll talk later though. Izuku. Ah. He hopped off of Rumi's lap and grew back to his normal size. Then Izuku's phone started going off. He pulled it out, revealing the caller to be Nizu. He put it on speaker and set it down. Nizu. Thank you for answering, Midoriya. I've been trying to call Mirko for the past 10 minutes, but it seems she's blocked every number I've used. Rumi. 'Cause I don't like you calling me, you bucking rat. Nizu chuckled from the other end of the phone before continuing. Nizu. Either way, the reason I called is because I just so happened to get a call from a very upset Ryukyu complaining that you moved without telling her again. Rumi. Well then, if she wants me to tell her, she should start looking at her texts within the week. Nizu. What matters is that my window is open and just heard a large wing flap and a gust of wind flew in. I'd prepare for a visit from our draconian friend. Goodbye. As he hung up, a loud thud was heard outside as Ryukyu landed. A second later, a very pissed off Ryukyu walked inside. Her gaze landed on Rumi and Izuku, so she started walking over. Once she reached them, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, put her hands on their shoulders, and started shaking them. Ryukyu, yelling, Do you two know how worried I've been? It's been nearly a month. When I saw the news I freaked out, but you didn't answer your door when I came. I thought you wanted space, but I come back 2 weeks later and you've moved here? Why didn't you tell me? She stopped shaking them and Rumi spoke up. Rumi. Well, I would have texted you, but you check your phone as often as a fish walks on land. Izuku. Rumi. Yeah, what he said too. Ryukyu pinched her nose and was about to say something when she noticed something. There was a certain smell in the air. Rumi was more relaxed, and there was a small bump on her stomach. Ryukyu. Oh my god! You've got to be kidding me. She grabbed their wrists and dragged them outside where no one else was. Once they were far enough away, she spoke up again. Ryukyu. You're pregnant. Really? Rumi. Yep. Ryukyu sighed and shook her head. Ryukyu. Why are we even friends again? Rumi wrapped her arm around the Dragoon hero's neck. Rumi. 'Cause you love me, Ryuko. You know it. Izuku chuckled, which just made Ryukyu turn on him. Ryukyu. Don't you think you're in the clear either, Midoriya? You got her pregnant. Do you know what this could do to her career? Izuku nodded and pointed at Rumi. Rumi. You know I couldn't care less about my career. I'm keeping them and you can't do anything about it. Besides, I'm only gonna be pregnant for 2 months. Mine and Izuku's quirks basically make it so it's a lot faster. I'll be kicking ass in 4 months? Ryukyu. But why? Rumi. Because I want this. Izuku is the first guy I've genuinely liked since high school, and he's the first I've loved. This isn't just my choice, it's ours. We've both agreed to keep these kids. Ryukyu stopped. Ryukyu. Kids? Multiple? Rumi nodded and smiled. Izuku walked over with his phone. Izuku, we're having twins. Ryukyu looked away and started mumbling. Ryukyu mumbling. Okay. They're having twins, just twins. She's your best friend, Ryuko, you need to be supportive. She turned back around and placed her hands on Rumi's shoulders. Ryukyu. Rumi. Are you sure you're ready? Rumi nodded. Rumi. I am Ryuko. More ready than I'd ever been for anything before in my life. Ryukyu nodded, then moved on to Izuku. Ryukyu. Midoriya. I know you believe you're ready, I'll believe you. Protect her and those kids, okay? Izuku saluted her. Izuku ra. Ryukyu nodded and smiled. Ryukyu. Good. Text me if anything happens, I'll come immediately. I promise I'll check my phone more. She gave Rumi a hug before stepping back, transforming, and flying off. Rumi smiled. She and Izuku now had the support of her best friend. The future looked bright for once, and it was a nice change of pace. Night. It was the next morning and the class were sitting in the common space before class. Izuku and Rumi were next to each other eating breakfast. It was a regular morning so far until Aizawa walked over to the class. Aizawa. Alright. As you all know, well except Midoriya as he wasn't in class, but you are all eligible to do work studies with pro heroes. Uraraka and Azuri, Hato wishes to introduce you to Ryukyu. Kirishima, Amajiki wants you to meet Fat Gum. And Midoriya and Ishido, Togata thinks Sir Naitai would be a good place for the two of you. Izuku looked at Rumi worriedly. While Naitai wasn't exactly hostile towards demon types, he definitely wasn't sympathetic towards them, and he was one of the heroes who publicly shamed them for their relationship, saying it was unprofessional and wrong, amongst other terms. Rumi. Are you sure? You know his opinions. Aizawa sighed. Aizawa. No, I'm not. But Naitai is well respected, he wouldn't bring his personal feelings into play. Will you go? Izuku nodded. Rumi. Then I'm going too. I won't let him go alone, especially if Naitai can't keep his opinions to himself. The tired hero nodded, then turned to Ishido. Aizawa. And you? Ishido. Yes, I will. Aizawa. Alright. You're all excused for the day then. The big three are waiting by the main gates for you all. The rest of you, get to class. He then walked out of the building. Izuku, Rumi, and the rest of the called students walked out after him. It took a few minutes, but they eventually made it to the gates. Togata and Hato waved at them as Amajiki looked away in nervousness. The group of 4 heading to Naitai's agency was the first to get off the train. They waved to their friends as they left the platform and walked out into the streets. Togata. So, Mirko. Rumi. What? Togata. You and Midoriya. How'd that happen? Rumi shrugged. Rumi. Just did. I took him in and we grew closer. Eventually feelings came and bam, relationship. The boy nodded. Rumi. Why? She was a little suspicious of the blonde third year. While he didn't seem the type to judge, she had learned not to trust simple outward appearances. Togata. Just curious. I was shocked when I heard at first. Mirko, the worked best alone. Mirko getting a boyfriend, let alone a student. But you two seem happy, so I won't judge. Ishido. Yeah, you should have seen the way she told the class she just walked into our section at the sports festival and kissed him. This made the boy chuckle before he stopped walking. Togata. We're here. The other 3 stopped and looked at the building. It looked like an ordinary office building, though it fit with Naitai's theme of a businessman. Togata. Let's go. He opened the door and led the group inside. After he checked in with the receptionist, they went up the nearby spiral staircase. After that they walked a little down a hallway before stopping at a door. Togata. He likes humor, so if you can make him laugh, you're golden. Then he opened the door, only for the group to see one of the sidekicks, Bubble Girl, and another work-study student, both shackled to tickle machines. Upon closer look, the student was Agatsuma. Izuku. Eh? Rumi. You said it, Izuku? At the mention of his name, the blonde girl immediately broke free of the machine and rushed towards him. Agatsuma Izuku. Only to be sidestepped and face-plant into the wall. Then Naitai, who they had just noticed, looked towards them. Izuku, thinking quickly, shrunk and started running around in his oversized clothes to try to coax a laugh out of the man. As Togata helped Bubble Girl and explained what was going on, the green-haired man spoke. Night-eye. Only someone as immature as you would find that entertaining. Izuku-ah. He pouted and grew back to his normal size before walking back over to Rumi and Ishido. After a few minutes, Night-eye had Togata and the other two already working for him leave, much to the behest of Agatsuma. Now the three guests were standing in front of his desk with him sitting behind it. Night-eye. First things first, I'd like to apologize for what you saw. Bubble Girl simply didn't have enough energy in her report. Now on to business. Why should I take you two on as work studies when I already have two, and two perfectly fine sidekicks? Ishido. More manpower is always a perk, and you'd have two of the most popular class in Japan. You would also be the first hero to take on a demon type. The man simply nodded, acknowledging her reasoning. Night-eye. I would have to pay you, be in charge of further training while you're here. I simply don't see why either of you would be worth my time, let alone both. And you, Mirko, why are you here? Rumi. We both know why you hick. Your stance on demon types have always been publicly neutral, and the fact that you're one of many who publicly criticized and even shame our relationship. I came as security to ensure your little mouth stayed clamped shut about either of those. Night-eye. I see. Well, I've decided I'll take Midoriya ever since you walked in. He will make a great asset to this agency. He stamped Izuku's paper, who then took it and put it away. Night-eye. Ishido, however, will have to prove herself. Ishido. Why? Night-eye. Simple. I don't believe you're worthy of your power. At this, Izuku growled, surprising Night-eye. Rumi then spoke up, knowing relatively what he was thinking. Rumi. Not worthy? Do you know what she's done with it? She's saved many, many lives. She fought at Hosu, defended both her classmates and the Hussycats at the training camp. I don't know anyone else who that power should have been given to. Night-eye looked shocked for a second. Night-eye. What are you saying? Rumi. That All Might made the right bucking choice. And I suggest you accept that. I can tell you wanted Golden Boy out there to have it. Well, he doesn't, boo-hoo. Come on, Izuku, let's go back. Izuku. Rah. With that, they left Night-eye, now very annoyed. And he still had to deal with Ishido, though now that he was called out, he'd have to give her some extra thought. Work study. Izuku and Ishido were standing in Night-eye's office, waiting with Togata, Agatsuma, and Bubble Girl for their fist patrol to start. Night-eye then entered the room and walked over to his desk, papers in hand. Night-eye. Now to begin. Since we have two new work-study students, we'll be doing patrols today. Me and Bubble Girl will be following a lead on an investigation we've been conducting, so the veteran work-study students will be showing the rookies the ropes. Agatsuma. Oh, please have Izuku come with me. Izuku started shaking his head. Night-eye. And why should I? Agatsuma. We're close and work well together. Night-eye. You are from two separate schools and you're clearly trying to get with him. So no, he will be going with Togata. Ishido, you will join Agatsuma here. Now please introduce yourselves with your hero names so you know them. Izuku pulled out his phone and typed his name out. Izuku, the Demon of Light Deku. Togata. Wow, I like it, I'm a million, the hero who will save 1,000,000 lives. Ishido then turned to Agatsuma. Ishido. I'm Pinky. Agatsuma. That's it. Ishido. Ms. Midnight wouldn't allow Alien Queen. Agatsuma. That sounds so much cooler either way. I'm taking on my grandpa's hero name of Thunder Hashira. Night-eye. Now that that's out of the way, let's go. He stood up and passed everyone a picture of a man in a bird mask. Night-eye. And if you see this man, do not engage, do not make yourselves known, and call for me and Bubble Girl. They nodded and left the building, starting their patrol. Somewhere deep underground, a man in a hood ran over to a door and pushed it open. Boss. Inside the room he opened was an office. Behind the desk sat a man in a bird mask, going over a large amount of paperwork. Overhaul. Yes? It's Aries, she's gone. An angered look then appeared on his face. Overhaul, yelling, "What?" He stood up and ran out the door, slamming it behind her. Overhaul, I won't let her get away. She may be a demon, but her art is too important to let slip from our hands. Izuku and Togata were perched on top of a building, keeping an eye out. Izuku then pulled out his phone to type. Izuku, why are we up here? Togata. It's a better view. Normally I wouldn't so I could hear nearby trouble better, but your hearing eliminates that need. How do you think Pinky's doing? Izuku, hopefully finding a way to keep Agatsuma off me. Togata. Oh yeah, that. Why does she like you so much? Izuku shrugged. Izuku, no clue. I think she said it when we met at the exams, but I wasn't listening. Ashido felt something hit her leg and bounce off. When she looked down, she saw a little girl with a horn on her head. She then bent down. Ashido. Hey there, are you okay? She held out her hand, but instead of taking it, the girl hugged her tightly. Ashido. Oh, there, it's all right. I'm Pinky, who are you? Before the girl could answer, footsteps were heard ahead of them, coming from the alley the girl came from. Overhaul. Eri, what did I tell you about running off to bug heroes? Ashido's and Agatsuma's eyes went wide. He was the one man they specifically weren't supposed to be near, and he wasn't even 10 feet away. Overhaul. I'm really sorry, ladies, she's just so inspired by you female heroes, she wants to be one when she grows up. Agatsuma. Oh, we're not heroes yet. Just students in work studies. But it is nice to know we look the part at Pinky? Ashido, why yeah. Overhaul. What are you nervous about? Agatsuma. Oh right, it's her first day of work studies. She barely even has her license. Ashido was confused. Why was Agatsuma saying all of this? Then it clicked. The weaker they sounded, the less of a threat he would see them as, and the more likely they leave alive. Ashido. She must have taken quite the tumble, huh? She took note of how dirty her dress was. Though her smell told the young hero that the girl in front of her hadn't just gotten dirty from a fall. Overhaul chuckled. Overhaul. Well, you know, children, always clumsy, thank God she's a demon type cause she didn't look too pretty after it. Fell off the roof, trust me, I have no clue how she got up there. He turned around and started walking. Overhaul. Come on, Eri, time to go back. But the girl didn't budge. Ashido, whispering. It's okay, go. We'll find you, and we will save you. Okay? You have my word. She flashed the girl a confidence-filled smile. Then Agatsuma placed her hand on the girl's shoulder. Suddenly a small mouse-shaped tracker was added to the girl's dress. Agatsuma, whispering. Keep this little guy safe, and we absolutely will find you. The girl nodded, a hint of hope in her eyes, and ran off towards her father. They then called their encounter in. Izuku walked into his and Rumi's shared dorm room and slammed the door in anger. Rumi, who was sitting and drinking tea, the only thing other than juice or water that recovery girl would let her drink, span around in time to see Izuku flop onto their bed and start screaming into a pillow. Rumi. Izuku? What happened? Was Nightai being an asswipe? Izuku sat up and shook his head. He put his notebook and started writing. Izuku, I'm not supposed to tell you. Rumi placed her hand on his shoulder. Rumi, if it makes you that mad, then buck confidentiality. Tell me. Izuku sighed and wrote again. Izuku, a Yakuza boss named Kaichisaki, or Overhaul, has a young daughter named Eri. It's suspected she's at least being neglected, but her reactions suggest something more physical. Like she knew the consequences for the people around her would be her fault. That's how Ashido described it. She's feeling guilty about letting her go. Rumi. Oh. Is there anything else? Izuku nodded. Izuku, she's a demon type. Meaning he can do anything to her, and it won't even leave a mark. Rumi. Damn him. Rumi took the notebook from Izuku and placed it off to the side. She then turned his head to face her. Rumi. Izuku, you're the most capable fighter in your class. Hell, your regeneration and exploding blood make you a more dangerous opponent than the big three themselves. Izuku looked at her confused. Rumi, what I'm trying to say is that, at UA, you're the best at kicking ass. So whenever he gets caught and a fight happens, you're gonna show the country just how good you are, okay? You and Ishido are gonna save that girl, and you're going to show that bastard why you don't buck with demon types. You got that? A small smile grew on his face and he nodded. She then gave him a kiss. Rumi. Good. Now get some rest, okay? I'll have someone bring up dinner for us. He nodded again and laid down as she got off the bed and left the room. Meeting. A week after Ishido's encounter with Eri and Overhaul, Izuku was coming down from his and Rumi's room when he felt his phone vibrate. He pulled it out to find a message from Night Eye. Night Eye Midoriya, you are needed today. Also, as much as I find your relationship unprofessional, Mirko is also required as there are people we are meeting with who are afraid of you. Ishido and Togata are coming in as well. Izuku hummed and thought of what could be happening as he walked over to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Rumi then came downstairs and walked over to the table. Izuku noticed how the bump had grown. It had grown large enough that only large, baggy clothing could hide it, and considering there were twins, they were lucky it wasn't any bigger yet. When she walked over, he showed her the text. Izuku. Ah. Rumi took a moment to read it. Rumi. Of course this has to happen now. At least it wasn't later when we can't hide this. Make breakfast, then we'll head out. Izuku. Ra. He proceeded to make pancakes for him and Rumi, as well as some tea as she had taken to it after Recovery Girl banned coffee. After eating they were on their way. Once they were at the gates they noticed Ishido, Kirishima, Tsu, and Uraraka ahead of them. Izuku loudly Ra. They turned around to see him, and Rumi coming up behind them. The two soon caught up. Kirishima. Hey, there you are, we were just talking. Turns out we all got called in today. Tsu. Yeah. Karo, very bizarre. We were even given the same address. Uraraka. Come on guys, we don't want to be late. They all nodded in agreement and left UA for the day. The group walked into the Night Eye agency, as that was where the meeting would take place. They noticed the big three walk into a conference room. Heido noticed them and waved at them to come in. Once they did, they noticed the room was full of heroes. Izuku and Rumi automatically recognized Ryukyu, who gave them a small nod of acknowledgement. Rumi noticed another hero who, despite annoying her, was friendly whenever they crossed paths. That hero was Fat Gum. They then took their seats and Night Eye began the meeting. Night Eye. Welcome, fellow heroes. As you know, you are here because of a mass team-up request my agency submitted through the Hero Network. Izuku noticed Uraraka and Tsu ask Ryukyu what the Hero Network was. Night Eye. What you don't know is why. He clicked a remote and a projector turned on, showing a slide of Overhaul. Night Eye. This is a man by the name of Kai Chisaki, though he appears to prefer his alias, Overhaul. We believe him and his organization, the Shaiha Saikai, have been dealing with illegal quirk-based drugs. Drugs that can deactivate quirks, maybe even erase them. The room then filled with murmurs, though it quickly quieted back down. Then a hero spoke up. Where is the evidence? Night Eye. Right now we have no solid proof, Rocklock. Rocklock. So we're running off assumptions here? Night Eye shook his head. Night Eye. Not exactly. Both Red Riot and Sun Eater have come into contact with the drug in question. Heido. Oh no, Amajiki, are you okay? He nodded and made a cow hoof. Amajiki. It came back a few hours later. Night Eye. Biz, why you are here, Eraserhead, do you know anything? Izuku only then noticed Aizawa, who then shook his head. Aizawa. No, I don't know anything. From the reports, Sun Eater's quirk genes were damaged directly. All mine does is stop them from activating, nothing more. Rocklock. Where is this going? Night Eye. I'm getting to it. Red Riot was able to use his quirk to deflect one of the bullets, allowing the police to analyze the contents. What they found were human blood and skin cells. The room once again was filled with murmurs about what was happening, but Izuku knew. He gripped the table hard enough to dent it, though he was calmed by Rumi before anyone in the room noticed. Night Eye. There's one more detail. Chisaki has a young daughter named Eri. The slide behind him changed to a picture taken from a camera near where Ishido and Agatsuma met Eri. Night-Eye, Pinky and Thunder Hashira came into contact with her. They described her as small, frail, and dirty, along with covered in bloody bandages, though the next detail about her makes this confusing. She's a demon type. The room exploded with outrage at the situation. Most at the realization of Overhaul using her for the bullets, some at the realization they'd have to save a demon. Kirishima, I don't get it, what's going on? Rocklock, and why are there kids here? We can't afford to just stop and keep explaining stuff to them. Newsflash kid, the guy's using his daughter to make the bullets. Night-Eye, they are licensed work-study students, and they are to be treated as official sidekicks. Then another spoke up. Why is the demon here? He shouldn't be allowed. A few yelled out in agreement. Night-Eye, you are welcome to leave if you wish, but he is not leaving this meeting. The hero stood up and turned to leave, but before he did he turned around and activated his quirk, which allowed him to greatly enhance his own strength. He leapt towards Izuku to hit him, but before he could the side of his head was met with a powerful kick. Rumi, you dare do that again, and I won't pull my kick next time. Another which sided with him tried to charge Izuku, but this time Ryukyu stopped them. Ryukyu, this is not the smartest choice. One last hero tried to attack, only to be met with one of Night-Eye's weighted stamps, which knocked him out. Night-Eye, may we please continue this meeting? After the meeting, Izuku was sitting outside. Rumi then walked up behind him. Rumi, it'll be okay. You'll beat him, I know you will. She sat down and took his hand, placing Oti on her stomach. Rumi, you'll beat him and any the best father to these two that you can. Izuku smiled and nodded. He was ready, now came the wait. The raid PT-1. Izuku, Ishido, Tsu, Uraraka, and Kirishima were standing outside what they had come to understand was the Yakuza's headquarters. Izuku also noticed he was getting some fearful looks, but that couldn't be helped. Rumi's pregnancy had been progressing and her belly was now too big to hide even with the biggest of Izuku's baggy clothing. There was only one more month before the twins would be born after all. Izuku watched as a police officer walked up to the large gate and knocked 3 times. Officer, open up, we have a war. The gate was then busted down, and a large man wearing a bird mask was revealed to be the culprit. Ugh! What are so many people doing out here this early in the morning? He didn't wait for an answer before going to attack. Just then his large fist was caught by Ryukyu in her dragon form. Ryukyu, everyone, go on ahead, Ryukyu Agency will handle this, just focus on the mission. With only a few nods of acknowledgement, everyone, excluding a small group of officers who stayed behind, rushed onto the property. As they did, many members of the organization rushed at them, though they were quickly taken care of by the single heroes and some police, leaving Night-Eye Agency, Fat Gum Agency, and around 30 cops to storm the rest of the compound. The group then made it to a small shelf in a hallway, where Night-Eye pushed in tiles in a combination to open the secret door. Once it was open, 3 thugs rushed out, but they were apprehended by Bubble Girl and Centipede. Bubble Girl, go, we've got these 3. Night-Eye, right. Follow me. He then ran down the stairs with the others following close behind. Once they were down in the basement of the compound, they came upon a wall. Rocklock, Night-Eye, are you sure this is the right way? Night-Eye, yes. I am certain. Suddenly Togata walked up and stuck his head through before pulling it back. Togata, it's thin, we can break it. Then Kirishima charged forward alongside the flash of pink that was Ishido. Together they broke the wall. They then pressed forward. After a few more minutes of running, they came upon another wall, but this time Togata just kept running, determined to save Eri. Night-Eye, break it. Suddenly a hole opened up beneath them, and they all fell into another room. They looked around and noticed 3 people. One was skinny, blonde, and had a bird mask on, another was tall, bald, and had a basic face mask, the third was skinny and had a sack over his head. Suddenly the guns from the police were taken from their hands. Aizawa, These guys must be Setsuno, Hojo, and Tabe. Amajiki. Allow me. He turned his arm and hand into tentacles as Aizawa erased their quirks and knocked out Tabe to prevent him from eating. Amajiki. I can hold them off, you all go. Suddenly his tentacles were cut and a new, feminine voice was heard. As expected of such ugly creatures, to be beaten by even uglier humans. I should kill you all here and now. The heroes and police could now see what made the cuts, obi belts, and they were coming from above. Izuku rushed forward and defected them, losing an arm in the process, though it quickly regenerated. Then the culprit stepped into the light to reveal herself from her hiding place within the wall. Nightai. Daki. Be careful, she's highly dangerous. She paid Nightai no mind as she spied Izuku. Daki. The brat who thinks he's better than the rest of us. He's much more ugly in real life. Without warning, she sent her belts at the crowd again, only for Izuku and Tamaki to defend against them. Amajiki. Allow us to take them, you all need to catch up to Mirio. Aizawa. Right. Let's go. The group then left Izuku and Amajiki to fight 3 shy Hasaikai members and an extremely dangerous demon type. Daki then jumped from her perch and down to the ground. Izuku bent down and wrote in the concrete for Amajiki. Izuku, leave her to me. Fight them. Amajiki. All right. He then turned his attention to the 3 men, leaving Daki to Izuku. Daki then sent her belts at Izuku, who had to dodge them. Once the attack ended, he charged forward, attempting to close the distance, but her belts were too fast. Izuku was pushed back to where he was before. Daki giggled. Daki. Even the most hideous of creatures can have skill, I guess. But you're still no match for my beauty. She then sent even more attacks Izuku's way, not giving him the time to recover. Eventually one caught him and cut him in half while slamming him into a wall, covering him in debris. She started to gloat. Daki. I don't see how you managed to beat anyone. I can tell you haven't eaten anyone. I guess you've just been luck. Maybe my next meal will be some cooked rabbit. This struck Izuku. He could tell it was a threat to Rumi's life. Ordinarily it wouldn't bother him, she could handle herself, but not now. Not while she was pregnant. This seemed to set him off as he allowed his anger to take hold, and he took a familiar form. He then stood up. Daki. How? I cut you in half. That should take longer to regenerate, even for me. She then noticed the angry look he gave her. He launched forwards at unmatched speeds and kicked her in the ribs, launching her into a wall. Before she could stand, she felt him wrap his blood whips around her and toss her into the air. He ignited blood on his feet and rocketed up and kicked her into the ground. Through the dust she sent belts at him, but his claws cut through them. He charged forward and cut her head off before he ignited his blood that was covering her. But through the inferno, a single word was heard. Daki, yelling brother. The raid PT2. Daki, yelling brother. Izuku looked back to see his inferno dying down and a humanoid figure emerging from Daki's back. Knowing this couldn't possibly be good, Izuku rushed to decapitate this one, only to just barely avoid being decapitated himself as he passed the new threat. Izuku was now behind the 2 demon types. Before he could move, he felt something fall off him. He looked behind him to notice Nana's cape on the floor as the beads that connected the sides were strewn about the ground. My. You can't even manage to reattach your own head? Daki. He bullied me. He was too strong and he fought me anyway. Don't worry, Big Brother will handle him. Oh, and your face, you really should take better care of your beautiful face. Izuku turned around to see what was going on, only to see an emaciated man crouching beside the newly healed Daki. Not wasting any time, Izuku charged once more, only for his strike to be blocked by sickles made of blood. The man pushed him off, and Izuku finally got a clear look at him. Are you the one who mutilated my dear sister? Izuku Ra. Huh? Do you believe I'm not worth talking to? Well, no matter. Yelling. I'll make you pay for what you did, or my name isn't Jotaro. Izuku noticed blood exit his opponent's body and come shooting towards him. He then attempted to swat the blood away, only for it to cut clean through his arm. Izuku quickly hopped backwards, hoping to get some distance from Jotaro, only for more blood slashes to be sent his way. Izuku was able to dodge all three, but then he noticed Jotaro look him in the eyes and point his finger in Izuku's direction. The first slash cut Izuku in half and the second cut his left arm off as he fell, though he was able to avoid the third by springboarding his torso with his remaining arm. He regenerated his arm and legs by the time he landed. Izuku didn't have time to even breathe before an obi belt nearly took his head off. Izuku looked back at the two siblings. Daki was now perched on her brother's shoulder. They were dangerous apart, but together nothing short of a top 10 hero could put a stop to them. Izuku. He looked around to see Amajiki had ended his fight, though he seemed too tired to fight more, even if he could keep up with either demon type. Izuku just barely evaded another blood slash and cut through another obi belt with his claws. By now his anger had run its course and he had reverted back to his regular form. He turned and ran in the opposite direction of Amajiki, hoping to keep him from Jotaro's vision, or at least his line of fire. This wasn't necessarily, however, as Jotaro decided to close the distance, though he had clearly told Daki something as she then took off in the direction the other heroes and remaining police went. Izuku bit his tongue and spat a blood bullet at Jotaro, who evaded it. Izuku then ignited it while it was passing the extremely skinny man, which stunned him for just a second. That second was all Izuku needed to rush in and swipe at his enemy's neck using his claw-like nails, which practically shattered. The momentum from the charge threw Izuku past Jotaro, who stood and laughed. Jotaro, you really thought my neck would be soft enough to cut with only your nails? He didn't give Izuku time to respond with the growl he was preparing. He charged at Izuku faster than before and stuck his sickles through Izuku's chest. Jotaro, good luck with that poison. Not even your disgusting regeneration speed can keep up with it. Though, I do happen to like all things disgusting and ugly. I'm willing to spare you. How's about it, HM? Join us and become one of the strongest demon types. I'll even take my poison from your system too. Izuku shook his head violently as he wrote in the concrete. As he did so, he noticed an object nearby, though he wouldn't let Jotaro know it was there. Izuku, yelling, "Rah, no. Won't join you. Go to hell." Jotaro smirked. Jotaro, fine by me. I'll just get one of your disgusting children to do it. Izuku looked at him in shock. Jotaro, you must be wondering how I know. Well, let's just say this, the League and the Yakuza aren't the only ones vying for power. Now that Izuku was so close, he could see the word and number etched onto Jotaro's eyes, upper 6. Jotaro, I'm a nice guy, so I'll give you one last chance, you or the kids? The second mention of his unborn children sparked rage instead of shock. Izuku grew as he shook his head once more. Izuku yelling, "RH, either." In a swift motion he reached his right arm out to his side and grabbed the katana that Setsuno had dropped in his fight with Amajiki. In his rage Izuku didn't notice as his flesh enveloped the sword. Out of pure instinct he used the new-found blood vessels on the blade to ignite it, and he swung at Jotaro. The blade hit the man's neck and kept going. A millimeter, an inch, 2 inches, it began slicing through the hardened flesh like butter. Before he was decapitated, however, Jotaro managed to get his sickles around the sword, but that only stopped it. Both their thoughts were focused on completing one task. Jotaro, and no. It can't be. Why aren't I regenerating? Just what is this brat? Izuku must cut his neck. They were locked in a stalemate, an immovable object meeting an unstoppable force, blood sickles versus flaming katana. Just then both felt something wrap around the back of the blade. Izuku glanced over to see an exhausted Amajiki with his tentacles wrapped around the end of the sword. Amajiki, yelling, "Give it all you've got, Deku, we can decapitate him." Jotaro yelling, "What are you two planning?" For the first time since Izuku met him, Amajiki's eyes had no hint of fear and were full of confidence. Amajiki, yelling, "We're going for the win now." Izuku, I have to push more, I have to go beyond. He ignited more blood on the blade, the flames becoming a force of their own with the blade barely visible. Amajiki, I don't have much strength left, but I'll dredge up every ounce I do and push past my limits. Mirio would love to see this. Looks like I'm about to go beyond. Amajiki summoned every ounce of remaining strength in his body and yanked the katana in his direction. I/A yelling. RAAH/plus YLTRAA. The flaming blade pushed the sickles of blood out of the way and cleanly sliced through the neck of Jutaro. A loud clap of thunder could also be heard, but none of the people in the room had the energy to process it. Jutaro's head rolled away from his body, and the last thing he saw was the severed head of Daki stop rolling as well. Daki. BB brother. Jutaro, as sister. With those last words, they passed on. Izuku stood, barely able to stand. He shrunk down to his normal size once again. He looked up and saw that Amajiki was passed out, his remaining strength gone. Izuku then looked to the sword in his hand, which retracted into himself, fully becoming part of him. A loud crash was then heard from far away. Gathering his thoughts, Izuku ran from the room and towards the others, determined to help some more. The raid PT3. Izuku rushed towards the others and the loud crashing sound he heard. He passed by multiple unconscious Yakuza members while on his way, including the headless body of Daki. After a couple minutes of running, he came across a final hole which he promptly rumped through. What he saw shocked him. Night Eye was missing an arm with a spike through his stomach, Agatsuma was trapped under rubble, and Togata was collapsed a mere 2 feet from the exit. What shocked him the most was the gigantic hole in the ceiling leading to the surface where Ashido was fighting a gigantic monster. He ran over to Night Eye, though just before he crouched next to the man, something caught his eye. Izuku. Ah? Night Eye. Pinky is F fighting him. Cough. The girl's quirk is allowing her to go 100% by rewinding her, but even from here I can tell she's struggling to cough keep up with the girl's quirk. Eraserhead is already up there, you need to help end the fight. Izuku focused and brought the sword back out. Izuku. Ra. Night Eye. At this point, killing him might be for the best. Do what you must, Deku. Izuku nodded, crouched down, and jumped with all his might to the surface. Now he could see it clearly, the rewind was beginning to overtake the damage One for All was doing to Ashido, so he had to make this quick. He scratched his hand, smeared blood on the bottom of his feet, crouched down, wound his katana back, and waited. Using his enhanced sight, he was easily keeping track of the fight. Once he noticed them going in the right direction, he pounced. He jumped as high as he could and ignited the blood to take him higher and make him faster. In the blink of an eye, he was already at their height. Ashido. Midoriya? Izuku Ra. He swung the blade, once again igniting it. It made contact with Overhaul's alter neck. Before it could cut all the way through, Izuku was pulled away by a large hand. Overhaul, yelling. I will not be defeated by the likes of you, and I will not be killed by a demon. Izuku couldn't break free of the hand's grip. Ashido noticed this and used air pressure to launch herself over to him. She punched the hand, which made it explode. They then began to fall. Ashido was about to launch herself back up when Izuku stopped her. They landed, but so did Overhaul. Ashido. What now? Izuku wrote on the asphalt they landed on. Izuku, you rest. I take from here. Ashido. No, I wa. She then buckled over in pain as the rewind overtook her. Eri. I can't stop it. Izuku smiled at her and nodded, comforting her as her quirk suddenly shut off and both girls fell unconscious. The two were taken by what looked to be Tsu's tongue, which now allowed Izuku to only worry about the fight at hand. Overhaul. You cannot defeat me on your own. Izuku smirked, yelling. He's not godlike speed. Just then a flash of yellow lightning appeared from the massive hole in the ground. After a second, a bruised and battered Agatsuma landed next to Izuku. Overhaul. I thought I killed you. She shook her head. Agatsuma. It's gonna take more than some rubble to keep me down. Right, Izuku? Izuku. Agatsuma. Right, the fight. I have a plan. Izuku. Agatsuma. If you can find an opening, I can use godlike speed again to finish him. But we can only do it once before all my strength is sapped. Izuku nodded, put away his katana, and charged forward. He ripped into his arms and covered his hands in blood. He then jumped and shot a blood bullet at the monster's main body. It was simply swiped away, but he ignited it anyway. The flames seemed to bother him. He landed on one of its arms and began running while tearing through Overhaul's flesh with his nails. While he was doing so, he was leaving small amounts of blood which then entered Overhaul's own bloodstream. Overhaul yelling, "Get off!" He then swiped at Izuku, who merely jumped onto the arm and began the process once more. It was then Overhaul did what Izuku was waiting for. He disassembled and reassembled himself to heal, inadvertently mixing Izuku's cells with his own. Izuku fell to the ground. Izuku Ra. He then ignited the cells which made several parts of the giant body catch on fire. Overhaul, now screaming in pain, had no way to defend himself. Agatsuma, yelling, "Godlike speed!" In a fraction of a second, Agatsuma blitzed through the monstrous man, her blade going through the man's neck so fast he didn't even feel it. When she landed, she sheathed her blade, and Overhaul's head fell from his body. Izuku walked over to her. Izuku. Ah. Agatsuma. Yeah? He held his hand up in the air. She jumped up and gave him a high five. Their joyful mood didn't last long, however, as news crews quickly appeared on the scene. Izuku also remembered a news copter he had seen while in the air. One woman ran out with a cameraman right behind her. "Reporter, you demon!" Izuku already disliked this woman. "Reporter, you claim to be a hero and yet you helped kill this man." Izuku was in for a chewing out from the media. After the raid. Reporter, 2 more decapitated villains have been found within the headquarters of the Shai Hasaikai. Both are believed to have been killed by the so-called Demon of Light, Deku and Thunder Hashira. We have been told an investigation is underway to revoke these 2 of the... The television was turned off. Izuku muffled mm. It had been a few days since the raid. Now, Izuku was face down on the couch. Rumi was sitting next to him, ruffling his hair, and Tokoemi was examining the katana. "Rumi. I know, babe. They're all ignorant little buckers. It'll be okay." Tokoemi. "Incredible." Rumi. "What is it?" Tokoemi. "This blade, it's made of metal and hardened flesh. Whatever happened, Midoriya was able to change the structure of the blade entirely." Izuku extended his hand for Tokoemi to hand him the blade, which he did. Once the handle touched the boy's palm, it was immediately brought back into his body. Tokoemi. "Fascinating." Just then Aizawa walked over. "Aizawa, we're going to have one hell of a time fixing this media mess." He felt his phone vibrate. He checked it to find he got a message. "Midoriya, sorry Mr. Aizawa." The man sighed. "Aizawa, don't be. Just about any other hero would have done the same. It's just because it was you." Izuku muffled. "Ah." Aizawa. "Anyway, I wanted to tell you something before you go up to your room. Tokoemi can hear this too, I guess. I concerns that." Izuku sat up and looked Rumi in the eyes. She nodded, he nodded, they both looked to Aizawa and nodded once more. Aizawa. "All right. As you know, your children are due in a month." Tokoemi. "Wait, wa?" Aizawa. "The UA School Cultural Festival is taking place in a month as well." Tokoemi. "Holdo." Rumi. "So Izuku will miss this year's, so what?" Tokoemi. "How low?" Aizawa. "Yes. I want to know if he's okay with that. Are you?" Tokoemi. "Plea." Izuku. "Ra." Izuku smiled and nodded. Aizawa. "Good. Now get to bed, you have makeup classes to attend." Izuku. "Ah." Rumi. Yeah. Let's go, Izuku." The 3 then left the room, leaving Tokoemi alone. Tokoemi. Revelry in the dark. The next day Izuku walked into his and Rumi's room after his makeup class, which took him and the other work-study students until 5 to complete. He sat down on their bed and laid back. After a couple more minutes the door burst open revealing Bakugo. "Bakugo, hey Izuku. Izuku sat up. Izuku. Bakugo. Come on, move it! He grabbed Izuku by the shirt and dragged him down to the common space. Once they were down there, Bakugo dragged him over to where Rumi was sitting. Bakugo. Brought your boyfriend. Rumi laughed. Rumi. Thank you. You can go back to whatever you were doing before. Bakugo dropped Izuku, who quickly stood up. Izuku. Rumi. I know, not the best way to get you down here, but I saw how you walked in. You were gonna laze around in our room until dinner, then sit on your ass until bed. Izuku feigned offense. Rumi. Don't give me that. The both laughed a little before calming down. She reached over and grabbed his hand. Rumi. Izuku. I think we should tell your class. Tokoyami already knows, and we won't be able to hide it for much longer. Izuku smiled at her and nodded. He pulled out his phone to type. Izuku, as long as you're okay with it. She nodded back. Rumi. I am. Then it seemed like Izuku remembered something and he began to type on his phone again. Izuku, after this, we need to go see Nizu. It's important, really important. Rumi. Sure. Now let's get this over with. She stood up and the two walked over to the common space where a majority of the class already was. Rumi. Hey, Ida. Ida. Yes? Rumi. Call the others here. Ida. Okay. What for? Rumi. You'll see. After a few minutes, the remaining students showed up. Kaminari. What's this all about? Hagakure. Yeah, I was in the middle of doing homework. Rumi. Well, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I'm pregnant with twins. That made the class go quiet. Tokoyami. Since I wasn't allowed to talk last time. How long? Rumi. Since the licensing exam. After that, the class exploded in questions, mainly about the pregnancy itself, though a few were why Tokoyami knew. After a minute, they quieted down, and Ida raised his hand. Rumi. Yes? Ida. Forgive me if this is invasive, but when are they due? Rumi. In a few weeks. Yaoyorozu. But how? That would mean you were pregnant since before the school year began. Rumi shook her head. Rumi. With the amazing power of quirks, the pregnancy time was shortened to 2 months. Yaoyorozu. How? Rumi shrugged. Rumi. Ask Recovery Girl. A few hours later, Izuku and Rumi knocked on the door to Nizu's office. Nizu loudly, come in. They did so and walked over to the desk before sitting down in chairs. Nizu. If it isn't my favorite couple. How can I help you? Rumi. Izuku has something important for us. Nizu. Well, let's hear it. Izuku pulled out a piece of paper he had already written on and gave it to the rodent. Nizu. Now let's see. During the raid on the Shai Hasaikai, I came across some disturbing information. The demon-type Jutaro had the words upper 6 engraved into his eyes. He wanted me to join him and his sister and become one of the most powerful demon types. I refused and he mentioned me and Rumi's unborn children. He also mentioned that the League and Yakuza weren't the only organizations vying for power. There is another organization, most likely compromised only of demon types, and they have a way to spy on people within UA. It's either that or one of the heroes at Naitai's meeting was a spy. My, this is disturbing. Rumi. I don't care what this organization is made of, they can only hurt our kids once they're born. After they're born I can fight again and I'll kick their asses if they try and touch them. Nizu. While I do not doubt that, I'll have some heroes stationed in and around the delivery room. Rumi. We'll teach them not to mess with us. Family. It was the morning of the cultural festival and all the UA staff plus Izuku and Rumi were having a meeting regarding the event and the organization Izuku had reported to exist. Nizu began to speak. Nizu. Hello everyone, this is an important day for many, so I'd like to get this over as quickly as possible. As you all may know, we are on thin ice with this event, one alarm trip, and we are to lock down the entire campus as well as cancel any event that hadn't happened yet. Any questions? No one raised their hands. Nizu. Good. Now, to ensure security, we will have Hound Dog and numerous ectoplasm clones walking the perimeter. Snipe will be stationed at the top of Yuri to relieve Hound Dog for breaks. There is something else I need you all to look out for. If anyone has something along the lines of upper engraved on their eyes along with a number, call for a lockdown. Lunch rush. What's the seasoning, pun intended, behind this, boss? Nizu pressed a button which turned on a projection of a slideshow. The first picture being the severed head of Jutaro with his eyes clamped open. Nizu. I apologize for the rather disturbing image, but Jutaro is the only subject we have. As you can see, his eyes have the exact engraving I mentioned. He was an incredibly powerful demon type who was only beaten once Midoriya was able to get his hands on a katana, and even then the help of young Amajiki was needed. Snipe. No offense, boss, but how can we call him powerful if 2 students defeated him? Nizu. Let me put it this way. It took 2 pro-level individuals to bring this man down. That and his regeneration was too fast to just snap his neck to knock him out. These 2 had to not only work together to defeat him, but used so much strength that Amajiki passed out and Midoriya had to take time to recover, even with his regenerative abilities. Aizawa. So basically, if we see anyone on campus with those markings, it's kill on sight? Nizu nodded. Nizu. Unfortunately, yes. Now this meeting is over. You are all dismissed. Everyone got up to leave. Nizu. Except you 2, Midoriya, Mirko. Izuku and Rumi sat back down, and Nizu waked over to them. Rumi. What is it? Nizu. I just wanted to ask you 2 to stay near the gates. Obviously you might not have your children today, but it would make everything much easier for everyone if you were at the exit instead of the other side of campus. Rumi. I don't feel like having this known to the world, you know. Nizu. Fair enough. Just a suggestion. He then walked out of the room. Rumi. PSSH. The rat's worried for nothing. It'll be fine. It was not fine. It was around halfway through the day and both Rumi and Izuku were walking out of 1A's concert area after Izuku had finished helping with the cleanup. It was there, halfway across campus, that Rumi's water broke. Now they were in a hospital and on their way to a delivery room with a couple nurses. Rumi yelling, "Why didn't that damn rodent warn us?" She looked to Izuku, who just gave her a deadpan look. Rumi yelling, "Don't look at me with that face." They reached the room and were about to go in when another nurse stopped Izuku. Izuku Ra. Nurse. I'm sorry, but demons aren't allowed in here. The nurse was then grabbed by the shirt by Rumi, who then gave him her famous, murder rabbit, stare. Rumi. You let him in, or I'm kicking your ass once this is over. Nurse. He'll eat your baby. Rumi yelling. No, the buck he won't, he wouldn't dare eat his own kids. The nurse seemed stunned, which gave the group enough time to rush inside without being stopped. Just before the door closed, Izuku looked back to see both Ryukyu and Edgeshot block the nurse from entering the room. Seems like Nizu wasn't joking around with the heroes he requested as security. As soon as Rumi was transferred from the gurney to the hospital bed, the doctor entered the room. Before he started the procedure, he sent a nod to Izuku, telling him Rumi and the babies were in good hands. 19 hours later, and both twins were born safely and screaming. The doctor carefully handed them to Rumi after tying the cords. They looked nearly identical, though the elder had 6 eyes and the younger had a dark red mark on his forehead that resembled fire. Rumi. They're beautiful. Izuku. Ah. Doctor. 2 healthy baby boys. He grabbed a clipboard nearby and began writing on it before walking over. Doctor. Do you 2 have names ready? They looked at each other, then the doctor, and nodded. Rumi. Yes. We decided the older one would be Michikatsu Midoriya and the younger would be Yorichi Midoriya. The doctor wrote on his clipboard more. Doctor. Wonderful names. Then nurses walked in, wrapping Michikatsu in a purple blanket and Yorichi in a red one. Before they were taken out of the room and checked for proper weight and air flow, the doctor stuck name tags onto them. Izuku and Rumi fell asleep shortly after due to exhaustion, Rumi from giving birth, and Izuku from constantly regenerating his hand, which Rumi kept breaking with her grip. The next morning they awoke. Izuku. Rumi smiled and nodded. Rumi. Yes, I'm okay, Izuku. She then pressed the call button on her bed and a nurse came in after a minute. Nurse. Oh, you're awake, I'll call the doctor in now. She then left, and another doctor came in. Doctor. Izuku Midoriya and Rumi Yusujiyama, right? Izuku/Rumi. Ra/yeah. Doctor. Great. I'll take you down to the nursery. Do you need a wheelchair or anything, Ms. Yusujiyama? Rumi shook her head and got out of bed, though she stumbled a little. Rumi. Guess I'm a little less rabbit than I thought. Izuku walked over and helped her walk. After a few minutes they were in the nursery and standing over Michikatsu and Yorichi's heated cribs. Doctor. Here they are. Now we've done a blood test on them. It seems little Michikatsu here already has his quirk, though the typing doesn't surprise me. Rumi. What is it? Doctor. He's a demon type. Hopefully one like his father here. Rumi. And Yorichi? Doctor. We don't know his. We know it's linked to that mark on his forehead, but nothing else. I'm happy to say that the delivery was a complete success. We will need to keep you and the children here for another day for you to recover and for us to ensure they're completely healthy. After that, you're free to go. Izuku Ra. Rumi. Yeah, Izuku, we're gonna be the best damn parents ever. They shared a kiss before going back to Rumi's hospital room. Once they did, Izuku walked over to the window and looked to the sky, knowing his mother and grandmother would both be happy when they saw his little family. Backlash. Nizu was out getting a snack when he passed a store with TVs in its windows. As usual, they had the news on them, so he didn't pay them any mind. It wasn't until he heard what the news was reporting on that he stopped. Anchor. This just in. The number 5 hero Mirko, otherwise known as the woman dating a demon, has given birth to twins just 9 hours ago. Nizu stopped and looked to the TV, knowing this wasn't going to be good. Anchor. According to our sources, the twins are indeed fathered by the demon known as Izuku Midoriya, a wannabe hero in training at UA High. One has even inherited the demon genes of his father. Random civilian yelling. What? This is ridiculous, they can't let him or those kids be set loose. RC2 yelling. What has society fallen to that we allow demons to protect us? Even our heroes are falling for his lies. Nizu turned around to find what he feared: hatred. The eyes of the people surrounding him were filled with rage and fear. He looked around and found a pile of boxes, quickly climbing to the top. Nizu yelling, enough. RC3 yelling. And who are you? RC1 yelling. That's Nizu, why'd you let that demon into UA? Nizu loudly. Because he isn't a demon, he is a teenage boy that society has repeatedly stepped on and trampled, and he still wants to be a hero to protect it. RC2 yelling. And what if he turns? You can't guarantee he won't. Nizu loudly. You aren't scared of him turning. You're scared of what it means if he does. You're scared to face your actions head on. You're scared that if he turns, that means it's your fault. Well, guess what? He won't. I can guarantee that he won't. RC2 yelling. How? Nizu loudly. Because he would have already. The crowd became restless and many more began to yell. His words had done nothing to ease their fears. Nizu leapt from the box pile and began to run back to the UA building while calling someone. Hello? Nizu. Tsukachi. Get a helicopter to extract Midoriya, Mirko, and their twins as soon as they can leave. I want them nowhere near the front entrance of the hospital. Tsukachi. On it. Why though? Nizu. The public knows. And I doubt they'll stop until they get their hands on those 4. I need to mail another call. Tsukachi. Right. Good luck, Nizu. The call ended and Nizu made another. Nizu Mera. Mera. Yon yes, Nizu? Nizu. I need every hero whose public opinion of demon types is negative away from Mizudafa Central Hospital. Mera. Why? Yon. Nizu. Look at the news. I need to get to my office. I'll call you back then. Mera. All right. Bye. He then made one last call. Aizawa. This about the news? Nizu. Yes. I need you, Mike, Vlad, and 13 as extra guards at the hospital. Aizawa. Right away. Nizu. Good luck. The call ended and Nizu picked up the pace. It took him nearly half an hour, but he made it. In front of the UA gates was a mob. They were even carrying signs. Nizu. Been a while. Hope I haven't gotten rusty. He ran into the crowd and used rat-like movements to perfectly weave through the people. He was able to make onto the campus before crowd was able to trigger the gate. He rushed to his office just to find he was getting a video call from the HPSC president. He answered and he could see the anger on her face. President. Nizu, did you know about this? Nizu. Please excuse me, Ms. President, but you'll have to be a bit more precise than that. President. Don't give me that. You know I'm talking about Mirko and her children she had with that demon brat. Nizu feigned interest. Nizu. Oh, that's sorry, but I didn't know about it. President. Then why did I have to find out from the news? Nizu. Because we both know what you would do with those children. You would take them and force them through your special courses to make them your assassins. President. You won't get away with this, we command every hero in the country. Nizu. And how many will follow your lead? UA already has many powerful heroes employed here, not to mention all the students training here. President. We still have the top 10. Nizu. That's the thing. You don't. Mirko herself will fight against you. Ryukyu is friends with both Mirko and Midoriya, so she's with us. Both Edge Shot and Best Genus share positive opinions of demon types. Endeavor wouldn't go against his son, Shoto Todoroki, and last I checked, Hawks almost got himself eaten, so I'm sure he'd stay away from this. The people are swayed by their favorites. The top 10 are the favorites of all of Japan. You try anything, and the public's faith in you disappears. He stared into the eyes of the president. President. Fine, you win this time. But remember, we fund you. The call then ended and Nizu slouched into his chair, letting out a stressed sigh. Nizu. I haven't been this stressed since the experiments. He shuddered at the thought from his past. Nizu. I will not allow those children to go through what I did. Never. He picked his phone and dialed Mara once more. Mara. Nizu? Yon, I did what I could, but it seems things have gotten a bit too out of control. I've got a few local heroes running crowd control, but other than that, nothing more can be done. Nizu. That's right. Extraction is on its way. Rumi. Geez. People got really bucking upset over a couple of kids? Nurse, choking. Oh, let me. Go. Please. Rumi turned her head to face the nurse she was currently choking for leaking information. She had also just caught her trying to take Michikatsu and Yorichi from the nursery. Rumi. Let me think about that. No. Actually, my arm is getting tired, so fine. She dropped the nurse who had just fallen unconscious. Then the doctor walked in. Doctor. Your ride is here. Go to the roof. Rumi. Hear that, Izuku? We're getting out of here. Izuku, Ra. He walked over to the heated cribs and picked up both twins before they walked out the doors, ready to face the storm this had created together. Return. Izuku, Rumi, and their twins landed safely on the grass of UA's campus. As the helicopter blades come to a stop, they step off. As they did, Nizu approached the helicopter. Nizu. Glad to see you four made it out okay. Rumi smirked. Rumi. It's gonna take more than an angry mob to break our spirits, you rat. Nizu chuckled. Nizu. I never doubted that. May I see the twins? Izuku. He bent down and showed them to Nizu. He stepped forward to take a closer look. Nizu. Well then. The six-sided one is Michikatsu and the one with the mark is Yorichi, correct? Rumi. Yep. Nizu. I'm excited to see how they grow. I'll let you two take them to the dorms. I have an angry mob to take care of, though please come see me later. Also, do not let them out of your sight. Rumi. We weren't planning on it. Nizu gave them a smile and walked away. The two parents then walked out over to the dorms. As they entered, they noticed the entire class was waiting there, including the small Eri. There was a congratulations banner above them. Class, congratulations. Eri, congrats. Tsu and Bakugo stepped forward first. Bakugo patted Izuku on the shoulder. Bakugo, looks like you're gonna have a lot more on your plate. Good luck. Tsu, I hope you two are ready, Karo. Izuku smiled at them, then another voice was heard. Ashido. Where are they? Let us see the adorable demon rabbit babies. She pushed through the class and over to the couple. She took one look at the two and immediately squealed in excitement. Ashido, yelling, Oh my god, they're so cute! The class then collectively swarmed the two. It took a few hours for them to relatively calm down. Now, they were lounging in the common space. Yaoyorozu was holding Yorichi and Tokoemi was holding Michikatsu. Yaoyorozu. Little Yorichi looks like a ray of sunshine. It's like he absorbs the sunlight itself. Izuku. Tokoemi. This child, he seems to be drawn to the darkness, yet shares his brother's radiance, much like the moon. He handed Michikatsu to Rumi. Rumi. Yep, he gets that from me, he'll be loyal to Mama, won't you? He began to cry and kick around. Rumi. How lively, like me too. Yaoyorozu. That reminds me, Yorichi doesn't seem to be as vocal as Michikatsu. Rumi. Yeah, he'll cry for food, but that's about it. As if on cue, the boy began to cry too. Rumi. Looks like I need to whip both out. She pulled up her top and began to breastfeed both children in front of the entirety of 1A. Izuku began to laugh as the others either stared in bewilderment or looked away in embarrassment. Rumi. What? If you all can't handle a little boob action, then you'll never be prepared for hero work. This didn't change the atmosphere much, but it did lighten the sudden tension. Rumi and Izuku walked into Nizu's office, each holding a child. They sat down and Nizu began to talk. Nizu. Thank you too for coming. This is highly important. Rumi. Then get on with it. Nizu nodded and cleared his throat. Nizu. As you know, a mysterious organization of demons may be after you too and your children. They are not the only ones now. Izuku. Ra? Rumi. Yeah, what do you mean? Nizu sighed. Nizu. As you may know, there is no government organization without a shady side, not even the Safety Commission is safe from that rule. They often take in children with powerful or deadly quirks to act as their Black Ops assassins. I do not know who their current agent is, but their previous agent was Lady Nagant. He looked up to see fear and anger appear on their faces. Rumi. You think they'll try to take them? Nizu nodded. Nizu. They won't act in the day, not when so many of the top 10 heroes are on our side, leaving only their Black Ops agent. Which is also why I hired a couple people to be guards. Loudly. You can come in now. One man walked in. He was tall and muscular. He wore a sleeveless track suit, 2 golden armbands on his biceps, and a gem-covered headband. Twin swords covered in wrappings and connected by chains were held on his back. Nizu. Tenjin Yuzui, otherwise known by his hero name, Sound Hashira. He's part of the lethal hero team, the Slayer Corps. His quirk, Sound Manipulation, allows him to amplify and utilize sounds in offensive attacks. Yuzui. I can assure you that your children will know just how flashy hero work can be. Izuku. Rumi. You said there were 2. Nizu. Ah, yes, I did. He must be nervous. Loudly. Come and burn out. Izuku recognized the name, but couldn't place where he had heard it before. Rumi yelling. No way, not him. Izuku whipped his head around to see the last man he thought would walk through the door. The man had black curly hair and freckles on his cheeks. From his mouth dangled a freshly lit cigarette. He looked at Izuku with eyes that once held hatred, but now only held guilty care. Hisashi. Long time no see, Izuku. How you been? Trusting fire. Hisashi. Long time no see, Izuku. How you been? Izuku froze. The last time he saw his father was during the Kamino incident, and they weren't exactly on good terms. Hisashi looked confused. Hisashi, I know we aren't exactly close, but does he usually just stop like that? Yuzui stepped over and waved his hand in front of Izuku's face. The boy did not blink. Rumi. Well, I wonder why Father of the Year. Hisashi chuckled and scratched the back of his head. Hisashi. Yeah, I guess I should have expected this. He noticed Yorichi in Rumi's lap. Hisashi. Is that one of them? The twins? Rumi looked down to the child in her lap, then back up to Hisashi. Rumi. Yes, he is. A smile grew on the man's face, but it quickly turned to a frown while he stepped back. He looked over to Izuku and saw Michikatsu in his arms. Hisashi. They look a lot like you too. Rumi. I would hope so. Izuku. He stood from his seat and walked over to Hisashi. Hisashi Izuku. A slap could be heard as Izuku smacked his father across the face. Hisashi brought a hand up to his chin. Hisashi. Okay, I deserve that. Ow. He turned back to Izuku, who then held Michikatsu out to him. Hisashi. Hey, are you sure? Izuku smiled and nodded. Hisashi. But you don't even know why I changed my views. Izuku shook his head and held the infant out to his father again. Hisashi. Okay, Izuku. He took the six-eyed boy from his son. He looked down at him and brought a thumb up to rub the boy's cheek. He began to tear up. Hisashi. I'm a grandpa. Izuku stood next to him, and they both started gushing about how cute Michikatsu was. While Hisashi and Izuku were having their bonding moment, Yuzui stepped over to Rumi. Yuzui. So, what exactly is going on? Rumi. That's Izuku's dad, who was extremely prejudiced against demon types. Apparently he just betrayed the League of Villains to be able to see his grandkids. Yuzui. You trust him? Rumi. Izuku does, and that's enough for me. He has a sixth sense for this kinda stuff. Like he can sniff out bad intentions. She stood and walked over to her boyfriend and his father. Rumi. As cute as Michikatsu is, both him and Yorichi are better together than separated. She handed the man the child in her arms, which he gladly accepted. Hisashi. I don't deserve this, but thank you. Rumi smiled. Rumi. Izuku trusts you. That's all the proof I need to know you're better than the asshole you were. The man merely nodded. Then, Nizu cleared his throat. Nizu. If I may continue. They all faced forward and towards the small rodent. Nizu. Perfect. Now, Sound Hashira and Burnout, you two will be tasked with being the bodyguards of the young Midoriya twins. You will be working at night as well. Is this okay with you too? Hisashi. Nights? Days? Doesn't matter to me. Yuzui. The flamboyant god of festivals works best in the dark. Nizu smiled. Nizu. Perfect. There is one more thing you must know. They both nodded. Nizu. Your primary threat will be a single individual. I do not know who they are, but they are a hero. This hero has been trained by the Hero Public Safety Commission from childhood to be a Black Ops assassin. So if they do strike, be prepared because they will strike fast and hard. Hisashi. Actually, I may know who it is. Nizu looked surprised. Nizu. How so? Hisashi. Well, someone like that would have to have a highly dangerous quirk and be willing to do whatever it takes to take down the villains, even join them. Right? Nizu nodded. Hisashi. Well, just before I left the League, Dalby had come into contact with Hawks. This surprised everyone in the room. Yuzui. Hawks? But he's the number 2 hero. Hisashi. Yes, he is. Which means he's dangerous. He might use his status to get close to the twins or someone who is and doesn't know the danger they're in. Rumi. Oh please, he wouldn't try anything, especially if it would piss off Izuku. Hisashi. Let's hope his common sense tops his loyalty to the commission. He handed the 2 children back to their parents and stepped forward. Hisashi. Burnout reporting for duty. I'll set his wings ablaze as he tries anything. Yuzui stepped up. Yuzui. Sound Hashira ready for action. He won't stand a chance against my flashiness. Nizu smiled. Nizu. Good Mirko, Midoriya, please lead these two to your extended dorm room. Izuku He leapt up, grabbed Hisashi by the wrist, and dragged him out. Rumi and a confused Yuzui followed soon after. Joint Training Exercise PT-1. It had been a couple months since the twins were born and Hisashi had returned. The small family had fallen into a routine. Hisashi and Yuzui would take shifts guarding the twins at night, letting Rumi take them in the day so they could properly rest. Izuku would also help Rumi however he could, though he couldn't do much on school days. Now, Class 1A was sitting in their classroom. The door pushed open to reveal an unusually awake-looking Aizawa. He walked over to the podium and stood there for a few seconds. Kaminari raised his hand. Aizawa. One moment. After a few more seconds, his tired demeanor returned. Aizawa. That's better. Kaminari? Kaminari. Never mind, sir. Aizawa let out a small sigh before speaking once more. Aizawa. Today will be a special lesson. All of your classes have been cancelled to make room for it. The class got excited. It wasn't every day they got to skip the hard stuff. Aizawa. Today is joint combat training with 1B. The class nearly jumped out of their seats in celebration, though Aizawa's signature glare shut it down. Kirishima then raised his hand. Aizawa. Yes, Kirishima? Kirishima. Sir, are we sure this is a good idea? We all know how judgmental and, well, with lack of a better word, insane Monoma is. He would latch on to Midoriya the moment he sees him. Aizawa nodded. Aizawa. Me and Vlad are aware. But we have also taken into consideration that Midoriya is strong and won't let Monoma get to him. Isn't that right, Midoriya? Izuku smiled and nodded. Aizawa. Good. But we have taken precautions just in case. Now get your costumes and meet up at Ground Gamma. Remember, your winter variants may be more restrictive than you're used to. He then left the room and let the students do as he told them to. Class 1A walked up the path to the observation platform. Many of their costumes had been altered for comfort in the colder weather. Many added fur and sleeves to their costumes. Izuku's didn't change much. The only things he changed was adding a pair of boots and a white scarf that covered his mouth. The class stopped and stood in front of Aizawa. 1B was already standing by Vlad. Vlad. Now that 1A is here, we can begin. Midnight. You'll mind if we watch? Everyone looked aside to see Midnight, and All Might walking up to the platform too. Behind them was Hisashi carrying Michikatsu and Yorichi, both wrapped in thick blankets. Aizawa. Kayama, All Might. Why are you here? Midnight pointed behind her to Hisashi. Midnight. He wanted to watch Midoriya fight. Hisashi walked over to Izuku. Hisashi. Rumi was called in for something and left them with me. Yuzui's tailing her to make sure nothing happens. Izuku nodded and was smiling under the scarf. The moment was promptly ruined. Monoma. Are those the demon brats? Do you think you're so much better than us that you'd show off your children? He took a step forward just to be stopped by a wall of flames. Hisashi then stopped using his quirk. Hisashi. I am not above showing you your place. If you insult my son or grandsons again, ash is all that will be left of you. Aizawa placed his hand on Hisashi's shoulder. Aizawa. Calm down. Let me handle this. Hisashi nodded and Aizawa dragged Monoma away. They came back after a couple minutes. Aizawa let Monoma go back to 1B and took his place next to Vlad. Aizawa. We're burning daylight. Vlad. Right. Now, today you will be split into teams of 4. Aizawa. Each team will consist of members of one class. Vlad. Each team will face off against a team of the rival class. Aizawa. To win you must either capture or immobilize each member of the opposing team. Murmurs of the similarities to the first combat training spread throughout the two classes. Vlad. However, to capture an enemy, you must take them to your team's jail. The screen behind them lit up to show multiple Niza-themed cages. Aizawa. And that's not all. Come out here. The students turned when they heard footsteps. They looked to a path that led around the corner to see Shinso appear. He was wearing the Winter P uniform, a mouth guard of some kind, and what looked to be Aizawa's capture tool. Shinso. Hey. Aizawa. Shinso here will be joining this exercise. He's been training and preparing to join the hero course. While this may be training for you, it's his entrance exam, so do not hold back. This will also gauge his effectiveness against trained individuals. Vlad. Shinso will join 2 teams and thus will be fighting twice. No. 2 carts appeared with boxes on them. Aizawa. Come draw lots. Joint training exercise PT2. Aizawa. Come draw lots. Each class approached the boxes, one labeled A and the other labeled B for convenience. Each student pulled out a ball with a number on it. They then had to find 3 of their classmates with the same letter ball. Izuku found that Ishido, Mineta, and Uraraka were his teammates for the exercise. They would fight based on the team numbers. Aizawa. Now for you, Shinso. He put 4 more balls in each box and beckoned his personal student over. The purple-haired boy reached into the boxes and pulled out a ball from each. He then showed them to Aizawa. Aizawa. Shinso will be joining B Team 5 and a Team 1. Vlad. 1 teams, please make your way to your starting points. The rest of you feel free to watch or socialize. Aizawa. Though I do suggest you watch. Izuku watched as both teams left. As they left his vision, he turned around to find Hisashi and the twins and walked over. He sat next to his father and held out his hands. Izuku. Hisashi. Here you go. He handed Yorichi over to Izuku, who gladly took his son. The 2 heard what sounded like a pair of hooves walking over to them. They looked up to see a girl Izuku heard being called Tsunatori walk over to them. Tsunatori. What is name? Izuku looked at her confused as Kaibara walked over. Kaibara. Forgive her broken Japanese, she's our American foreign exchange student. Hisashi. Ah. Alright. Is this better, Tsunatori? The girl looked at him surprised, as did Izuku and Kaibara. Tsunatori. You know English? Hisashi nodded. Hisashi. What was your question? Tsunatori. I wanted to know their names. Hisashi turned to Izuku. Hisashi. She wants to know their names. He pointed to Yorichi. Hisashi. That one's Yorichi and the one in my arms is Michikatsu. A few others then walked over and started talking to Izuku and Hisashi as well as each other. The 4 teams returned from their battles. Aizawa. Alright, last battle of the day. Get ready, teams. Vlad. Let's show those 1A chumps how it's due. A pink mist made its way into Vlad's nose and he promptly passed out. Midnight walked over and picked up the microphone he was holding. Midnight. Much better. Now, as he was supposed to say, good luck to both teams. Izuku and the test of his team made their way to the starting point. Uraraka. I wonder how we're going to win. Mineta. I know what you mean. That Shinso guy is spooky. Ishido. But Monoma's the real pain. Izuku. Ah. Izuku walked over to Mineta. Mineta. What is it, Midoriya? Instead of speaking, he mimed Mineta plucking a ball from his head, which he then did. Mineta. What now? Izuku dug into his arm and drenched it in blood. Mineta. So a sticky fireball? Izuku nodded. Mineta. Cool. The buzzer then went off, signaling the start of the match. Izuku Ra. He rose his fist in a pose. Ishido. Yeah, let's win this. She rose her dist too and the other 2 joined in too. The team then ran deeper into the training ground. After a couple minutes of running, they came across the other team's plan. Suddenly small barrels and pieces of pipes appeared from seemingly nowhere. One flew straight towards them and then grew in size. Izuku Ra. He jumped over it, only for it suddenly change directions and head straight for him. The fight had just begun. Joint Training Exercise PT3. Izuku spun around in the air and kicked the barrel, locking it off course and sending it flying. He landed next to his teammates. The team quickly went back to back, waiting for the next round of projectiles. Ashido. What do we do? They could be anywhere. Due to the sudden silence, Izuku was able to hear something in the distance, the laughter of a certain 1B student. Izuku ah. He took off in the direction he heard it from, and his classmates followed. As they got closer, more and more shrunk objects could be seen and attacked them. Uraraka. How close are we? Mineta. How should we know? The obnoxious laughter of Monoma was heard extremely close by. Mineta. Never mind. Izuku stopped and held his arm out, stopping them too. Mineta. Midoriya? What's going on? He put his finger to his lips and crouched down to write. Izuku, we still have the element of surprise. We should surround them. The others nodded. Izuku, you'll strike on my signal. You won't miss it. They then parted ways. Izuku slowly got closer while staying hidden in the pipes. He took note of Kodai shrinking nearby barrels, but only some. The others seemed to be too heavy for her. Getting curious, he found a barrel near him and slashed it with his nails. Oil began to spill out. Getting an idea, he smiled, pulled the barrel onto its side, and rolled it out into the open towards more heavy ones, which he assumed held more oil. Only Shota seemed to notice. Shota. Guys? Shinso. What? He brought out his katana, placed the blade near the oil, and struck it with his claws, causing a spark to fall onto the oil. The oil immediately caught fire, which quickly spread to the open area. Shota, fire. Monoma. What? Izuku absorbed his katana once more and made his move. He leapt from his hiding place and kicked away a piece of pipe Inagi was about to use to cut off the fire. Izuku ra. Monoma. The demon and he's alone, get him. Izuku jumped to avoid a resized pipe. Before he fell back down, he bit Hu's tongue and spat a blood bullet at Monoma, who managed to dodge it. Monoma. Try again, demon scum. A large explosion rang out. The 1B students had forgotten about the oil. Now they had to attack Izuku and avoid a rain of fire from launched oil. Shinso threw his capture gear at Izuku, just for that portion to get melted by acid. Ashido landed in front of the tired boy. Ashido. Quite the Sigma Midori. The other two quickly joined the fight. Mineta. We can take these guys, Midoriya. Uraraka. Take care of Monoma and Shota. Izuku ra. He nodded, dug his nails into his palms, and ignited his hands as the blood ran down them. Monoma. Ha, 2-on-1, you can't win. Izuku charged at Monoma, only for a broken piece of concrete to pop up and block his attack, though it shattered in the process. While Izuku recovered from the surprise, Monoma landed a few punches which made him stumble backwards. Izuku rara. He jumped up and rushed Monoma again, just for an invisible force to knock him back several meters. Monoma. You didn't think I only copied one quirk, did you? He grabbed one of his pocket watches, threw it, and made it grow. Izuku shrunk under it and ran at Monoma. Monoma. Nah. Twin impact. Izuku grew back to his normal size, just for the large pocket watch to come back and hit him in the head. Monoma quickly touched it and returned it to normal before putting it back. Izuku stood, took in a deep breath, and ripped into his forearms, forming his blood into his blood whips. Monoma looked startled. Monoma. When could he? He was interrupted as Izuku went on the offensive again. A pipe was thrown at Izuku, who swatted it away with a whip. He jumped over another thrown watch and grabbed it with his whips. He swung it at Monoma, who put his arms up to block it. He shrunk it on contact but didn't see Izuku coming at him. A kick was delivered to his still raised arms. A crack was heard as the bones broke. A scream was then heard. Izuku whipped his head around to see Ashido with what looked to be black tendrils sprouting from her arm and going on a rampage. Izuku ra. He quickly turned around, hit Monoma in the head to knock him out, and took off towards Ashido. By the time he got to her, it seemed she had been brainwashed by Shinso, which made her calm down. The tendrils retreated back into her arm and she fell. Izuku caught her and set her down. The fall awakened her from the brainwashing. Izuku. Ashido. I'm fine. Look out. Izuku whipped around to find many objects hurtling towards them. He took out his katana and easily cut through them. Izuku Ra. Ashido. Yeah. Let's win this. They charged back into the fight. Quirks. Izuku, Rumi, and Ashido looked across the table at All Might. The twins were also there, being held by their parents. It had been just a couple days since the joint training exercise, and the man had claimed he had news about what had happened to Ashido. Now they all sat in one of the break rooms somewhere in the school. Rumi. And we're here, why? All Might. As the two people young Ashido actually know other than me who also know of One for All, it would be better if you two knew what is going on. Rumi nodded. Izuku. Ah. Rumi. He's right, we should hurry this up. All Might. Right. Well, I did some digging through old hero and medical records. I was able to find the man young Ashido had told us about. Daigoro Banjo, and as we already know, his quirk was Black Whip. He was in fact a hero, many years before even my master was born. Ashido. Whoa. One for All really goes back. I mean, I already knew that, but this just makes it set in more. All Might chuckled. All Might. I felt the same. He then pulled out a notebook from his jacket. All Might. As I said, I did some digging. Using what I know of All for One's methods and how One for All's impact on people, I was able to narrow down the other 4 quirks. We already know of Black Whip and my master's float. He placed the notebook down on the table and slid it towards Ashido. She opened it and began to flip through the pages. Ashido. Wow, it's so detailed and organized. All Might. You can thank young Midoriya here. He may not seem it, but I believe he's the most analytical in your class. He helped put this small guide together. Ashido looked at Izuku, who smiled and nodded. All Might. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to get this done so fast. Ashido. Really? She turned to him again and hugged him. Ashido, thanks. She then felt something tug rather hard on her hair. She yelped and jumped backwards, causing a sudden pain on her head. She looked at Izuku to find Michikatsu had accidentally ripped out a tiny fistful of hair. Izuku ah. Rumi. Yikes, sorry. Ashido laughed it off and rubbed her head. Ashido. No need, it's fine. A few strands of hair isn't too bad. All Might. That's not what they meant. It was then they felt it, how flat the side of her head felt. She looked next to her to find a large amount of link hair on the couch, and a pale crescent moon-looking object stabbed into the couch as well. Izuku. In the common space of their dorm building, Ashido at a table, staring into a mirror Oyama had handed her, at her request. There, her fears were confirmed. The left side of her head was completely flat, minus her ear, which just slightly poked out of what hair remained on that side of her head. Ashido, ugh. Her head fell to the table and her sparkling classmate took the mirror back from her. Kirishima. So what exactly happened again? She looked up, though her chin didn't leave the table. Ashido. Me, Mirko and Midoriya were talking about what me and Midoriya would do when work studies started back up. Midoriya helped me make a decision. I hugged him to thank him, and then Michikatsu decided that was the time for his quirk to activate. Kirishima brought up his hand and extended his index finger into the air, stopping a slow-moving crescent moon. Kirishima. These things, right? Ashido. Yeah. And he's been making them almost non-stop. Then Tsu walked over. Tsu. He has a lot of energy for a baby. Kero. Hisashi. You should have seen Izuku when he was a baby. The 3 looked under the table to find the grown man laying on his stomach. Kirishima. You good man? Hisashi. Those moon things hurt. Tsu. Well, if Michikatsu's is this strong, I wonder what Yorichi's will be like. A groan could be heard from Hisashi. Hisashi. Just don't let his be fire, I'm not dealing with a fire quirk. Ashido. But you have one. The man crawled out from under the table. Hisashi. Do you know how many tables my parents had to buy because I kept burning them? Too many. Siro then popped in, having overheard part of the conversation. Zero. You know, that mark on his head does look like a bunch of fire. Maybe his quirk could be covering himself in fire. Hisashi. If it is, I'm never holding him again. Another moon came flying over and hit Hisashi in the back of his head, knocking him over. Hisashi, come on. The group laughed as the man stood back up. The rest of the day was spent trying to get Michikatsu to stop using his quirk. New work study. Months had passed and now it was a bright, sunny, winter morning when Izuku and Rumi appeared in the common space, either carrying a child. While they were awake, they looked to be half asleep. The boys on the second floor and the girls on the third floor knew why. Despite their isolation on the girls' side of the second floor, which is where Nizan moved the family to, the cries of the babies could still be heard if the room was close enough. The two dragged themselves into the kitchen area and downed some coffee. Ashido then approached them. Ashido. Yeesh. You two look tired, what happened? Izuku. Rumi. Michikatsu and Yorichi wouldn't stay asleep last night. Ashido. How so? Rumi. It was like clockwork. First Michikatsu wanted food and cried. Then an hour later Yorichi did. The next hour Michikatsu needed a diaper change. And you can figure out what happened next. Uraraka, who was walking by, spoke up. Uraraka. So how many hours of sleep did the two of you get? Izuku held up 3 fingers and Rumi chuckled. Rumi. They're pains in our asses, but they're definitely worth the effort. Izuku nodded and grunted in agreement. Uraraka. So, who's with them now? Rumi. Hisashi. Yuzui should be returning from a mission today too, right Izuku? Izuku. Ah. Rumi suddenly felt the need to stretch. When she did, a chill went through her body, causing her to kick her leg and incidentally kick Mineta, who no one had seen, out of the kitchen and over to the couches. Izuku held in a laugh. Christmas special happens. Just a few days after Christmas, and 1A were now all back in the dorms. Class 1A were all lounging in the common space and both Michikatsu and Yorichi were playing with Rumi's hair. Then Aizawa walked over and cleared his throat to get their attention. Aizawa ahem. The class all looked to him. Aizawa. Listen up, I know you're all still riding the Christmas high, but we need to get back to work as of today. Work studies are back in session also, they are mandatory this time around. For those of you who already did work studies, I suggest staying with them. For those who didn't or can't go back, use your internship host if possible, or call them and see if they can point you in the right direction. If that doesn't work, either ask your classmates, other hero course students, or us staff about potential heroes. That is all, be wise in your decision. With that said, he began to walk off. Rumi. Hold on a sec, hobo. He stopped and looked at her. Rumi. I think we both know that Izuku will be significantly harder to find a work study for. Aizawa. Yes, I am aware. I was going to say this to you two later, but Midoriya is allowed to not participate. We have arranged for the Night Eye Agency to list you as employed once more to keep the HPSC off your back and let you stay here with the kids. The choice is yours, Midoriya. Izuku stood up. Izuku. Ah. Aizawa stayed quiet. Aizawa. Is that a yes you will stay or a yes you will participate? Sato. That was a yes? Izuku chuckled, pulled out his phone, and texted Aizawa. Izuku, I want to do a work study. Aizawa. Fair enough. Bring in the paper once you get it stamped. I'll be going now. With that said, he left the room, presumably to find an isolated corner to fall asleep in. The next few hours were spent by 1A trying to figure out their individual work studies. Izuku was sitting at a table trying to think when Rumi walked over. Rumi. Why can't you just go to Night Eye again? Izuku pulled out his phone. Izuku, sir, is still in the hospital. He's lucky to be alive. Centipede and Bubble Girl already have their hands full. Rumi. Right. Then Todoroki walked over. Todoroki. Midoriya. Could I ask you something? Izuku nodded. Todoroki. Would you be interested in coming with me to work study at my old man's agency? Rumi, you sure about that? Endeavor's never outright opposed demon types, but I don't think he's the type to take an izuku. Todoroki, he will, but only because I ask. Izuku stayed silent for a moment before nodding. Todoroki, good. You, me, Ishido, and Bakugo will all go to my dad's. Rumi let out a laugh. Rumi, that's a bit overkill, don't you think? Todoroki shrugged. Todoroki, not really. My father already has so many sidekicks, what's for more? Rumi shook her head as it was clear Todoroki didn't get what she meant. Rumi, never mind. So when are you four going to meet the symbol of compensation anyway? Todoroki, compensation? Rumi groaned. Rumi, you can't have flaming facial hair 24/7 without a reason. He must be compensating. Todoroki, for what? Rumi, quietly. For the love of. Yelling, just tell me when. Todoroki, in an hour. Rumi, thank you. A knock could be heard. Endeavor looked up from his desk. Endeavor, loudly, come in. He watched the door open to see his son, Shoto Todoroki, and 3 of his classmates walk in. Endeavor recognized them and realized all 4 of 1A's powerhouses had come for work studies. Endeavor, Shoto, don't you think this is a little overkill? Izuku snorted as he held back a laugh. Todoroki, what do you mean? Mirko asked the same thing. Was I wrong to bring them here? Endeavor shook his head. Endeavor, no. Todoroki, so will you take them in? Endeavor, yes, I will. But only because it means you'll come too. With that, Izuku's work study was secure, and he didn't even have to lift a finger. Endeavor Agency. It was the first day the group's new work study. They stood on the roof of Endeavor's agency early in the morning, their flame-headed host standing in front of them. It was clear he disliked the morning as much as they did, as it seemed he was slightly more grumpy than usual. Endeavor. All right, you 4, listen up. I asked Shoto here so I could further his training. He will be my priority, but as I am your teacher while you are here, I will ensure you all gain the information to become real heroes drilled into your heads. To do so, I need to know what I'm dealing with. Bakugo, you first. Bakugo grunted but complied. Bakugo. I sweat a nitroglycerin-like substance from my pores and exploded on command. I've focused on my hands and just recently started using my feet for propulsion. Endeavor nodded. Endeavor. Now, Midoriya. Bakugo stepped up again. Bakugo. He can't speak. We believe it's a sort of trade-off considering he doesn't need human meat. Other than that, he's your regular demon type. Strong regeneration, insane strength and speed, minor shape-shifting, as well as his blood demon art. Or whatever it's called. Endeavor. I see. And what is it exactly? Bakugo. Exploding blood. Despite the name, it's just fire. It only burns what he deems necessary, so if you're an ally, you're safe. He can ignite it at will and from any distance. He uses it to fly sometimes, too. Oh, and then there's his sword. Endeavor looked confused. Endeavor. Sword? Bakugo gestured to Izuku, who nodded and pulled his sword from his arm. The half-metal, half-flesh blade reflected the sun's light easily. Bakugo. I don't know much about that. He tells his handler everything, so get that stuff from her. Endeavor. Handler? Ishido stepped in. Ishido. The official term for why Mirko is in the dorms with us. Endeavor nodded. Endeavor. Right. How about you? Ishido then went on to describe the fact that she needs to work on her black whip control, while disguising it as a sudden manifestation of her quirk. Izuku had stopped paying attention due to the sunrise, which he began to watch. After a minute, their boss spoke up once more. Endeavor. All right. During your time here, you will each learn how to control your abilities better. To prove to me that you have gotten stronger over your work here, you must stop a crime faster than me once. Bakugo smiled, punched his palm. Bakugo. Prepare to be disappointed, we'll do that before the day's over. Their earpieces suddenly crackled to life. Dispatch. out-of-control car at the intersection of Main and Clay. Endeavor flared his flames and flew off in the direction of the incident. In response, the 4 students immediately began to follow him. Todoroki was sliding on ice and using fire to boost himself. Ashido was running and jumping across rooftops alongside Izuku, and Bakugo was flying. Despite their speed, the car was stopped, and the driver was safe before they arrived. As they landed, Endeavor looked to them and spoke. Endeavor. That is what you need to beat. Any slower, and many lives could have been lost. Understand? The 4 nodded and he approached them. Endeavor. Good. We'll be patrolling until noon. Then we go back to the agency for an hour of training. After that, you 4 head back to UA. Another call came in and Endeavor took off, leaving his students in the dust. Todoroki. We have a long way to go. Let's move. The group then began to follow their host. Dispatch. Alert man is floating through the city stealing glass with his quirk. He claims that some darkness is coming. Endeavor move. It had been a couple hours and the group had not been able to get close to Endeavor's speed. Now, they followed him to yet another crime. They rushed to the scene to see the man collecting the glass and adding it to an orb he was floating on. Endeavor. You stop this. The man turned to face him. Man. Endeavor welcome just the man I wanted to see. It's your fire that's bringing this darkness after all. He began to send the liquid glass towards the hero, who avoided it and went after him. In response, the man quickly descended and began to run. Endeavor gave chase, though the man was much faster than he expected. He chased him through multiple allies, when the group revealed they had gone around and cut the man off. Just before any of them could touch the villain, Hawks swooped in and took him down. Endeavor shot out of the ally and stopped. Bakugo, yelling. We had that bird brain. Ashido, yeah. Hawks stood up and scratched the back of his head while chuckling. Hawks. Yeah, sorry about that. I just couldn't It was then he saw Izuku and instantly took a few steps back. Izuku immediately grew a smug look on his face. He took a step forward and the winged hero took one back. Endeavor stepped between them and faced Hawks. Endeavor. Hawks, your help is appreciated. Why are you here? Hawks shook off his fear and pulled out a red book. Hawks. Oh, nothing really. Just wanted to give you this book. I think you'll really like it. I even highlighted my favorite parts. He handed it to Endeavor, who took it. He then swung around the large man and handed more copies to Todoroki, Ashido, and Bakugo. He carefully tossed one to Izuku from several feet away. Ashido. How many do you have? Bakugo. Kinda creepy. Hawks. Anywho, I should get going. Got somewhere to be. See ya, No.1. With that said, he flew off into the distance. Todoroki dinner. Endeavor and his students arrived back at the agency late one afternoon. Ashido was complaining about her feet hurting, Todoroki was overheating, and Bakugo's arms ached, all due to how far they were pushing themselves to try and outpace their host. Izuku, of course, was little more than winded. The group flopped onto a small set of couches that Endeavor had in his office. Ashido. This is impossible. Todoroki. I never knew how fast she was. Bakugo. This damn weather isn't letting me go all out. Izuku. Bakugo. It is so a valid excuse. Todoroki looked at the two confused. Todoroki. You can understand him? Bakugo. Yeah. It takes a while, but you can start to kinda get the vibe of what he's trying to say. Snoring could then be heard as the others quickly realized that Ashido had fallen asleep. Before they could wake their classmate up, their flaming boss walked through the doors. He took note of the sleeping Ashido and sighed. Endeavor. You've all worked hard today. Don't overdo it though. Can't have any of you giving out in the middle of a fight. He got vague sounds of acknowledgement back. Endeavor. All right. But you aren't going back to UA until late tonight. Bakugo. Huh? Why not? Endeavor. For Yumi, my daughter, wishes to have us all at the house for dinner. At the mention of food, Ashido leapt from her spot and rushed over to the large man, an excited grin plastered on her face. Ashido. When do we leave? Endeavor squinted at her, making her back away. Endeavor. Half an hour. Be ready. Ashido. Yes, sir. Bakugo. Uh-huh. Todoroki. Sure thing. Izuku. They then left the room to go change into their school uniforms and wait. A black car stopped outside the Todoroki house. Every door except the driver's opened, and out stepped the 4 UA students and Endeavor, now in civilian clothes. They closed the doors and the driver took off. Endeavor and Todoroki led them to the door and opened it. Endeavor. Fuyumi, we're here. As he said that, a young woman popped her head around the corner. Her hair was almost pure white, though it had small streaks of crimson. Fuyumi. Oh, good, food's almost done. As the rest entered, they took their shoes off. Todoroki, Shoto, gestured towards his sister. Shoto. Guys, this is my sister, Fuyumi. Fuyumi, these are my friends from UA. The 3 stepped forward and began to introduce themselves. She eventually turned to Izuku. Fuyumi. And you must be Midoriya, right? Nice to meet you. Izuku nodded. She then waved them towards her. Fuyumi. Come, sit. They followed her into the dining room to find a more traditional setup. As they sat at the table, the eldest Todoroki sibling rushed in with a large amount of delicious-smelling food. Then, she called someone else. Fuyumi. Natsuo, get in here. Soon after, a young man walked in. He noticed the people and took on a look of nervousness and anger upon seeing Endeavor. He swallowed whatever he was feeling and sat down next to his sister. Fuyumi. Natsuo, these are Shoto's friends from UA. Natsuo. I know who they are, I remember the sports festival. The table went quiet for a few moments before Fuyumi spoke up once more. Fuyumi. But let's not waste any time, dig in. Despite her effort, all 3 non-family members could feel the tension in the air. Izuku was certain he'd be able to burn it if it got any thicker. It remained that way for several minutes before Natsuo had apparently had enough. Natsuo. I'm sorry, sis, but I can't. I can't do it. Izuku looked to Fuyumi, to see a pained look on her face. Natsuo picked up his plate. Natsuo. Thanks for trying. He then walked off, going somewhere else on the property to eat. The rest of dinner was even quieter than before, the only sound being that of eating. When they finished, Izuku was the first to begin to pick up the dishes, even when Fuyumi insisted he didn't have to. He began to help Endeavor clean the dishes. Izuku. Ah. The man looked down to his student to see he typed something on his phone. Izuku, she tried really hard. I wish he could have stayed. The man sighed. Endeavor. Don't blame Natsuo. It's my fault. I haven't been the best father, something I'm sure you've already realized. It's something that I'm trying to atone for. His hatred towards me, I'm sure, will remain as a part of my atonement. Don't turn out like me, Midoriya. Izuku nodded. The 2 remained quiet during the rest of their dishwashing duty. As Izuku helped his teacher, he kept thinking of how to ensure he was a good father, as well as hoping Natsuo would one day be able to move forward. Little did he know, he would see Natsuo again very, very soon. Enemies. Natsuo exited the Todoroki estate an hour after he had left the dinner table. While he was resistant to the cold, he preferred to stay warm, so he was wearing a winter jacket. His backpack, stuffed full of his school supplies, was hung over his shoulders. He sighed, looking forward to getting to his dorm room at his college. He began to walk towards the empty road. Just as he reached the sidewalk, he heard a rustling behind him, and smirked. Natsuo. You can come out now. You aren't very good at hiding. A man stepped out of a nearby bush wearing civilian clothing, except for the mask on his face, which was black with a vertical, crosswalk-shaped pattern on it. Natsuo. And who are you? Someone here to hurt dear old dad? On the contrary, I want him to hurt me. Natsuo looked confused and chuckled nervously. Natsuo. Whatever you say, man. You guys keep getting weirder and weirder. What's your name? You can call me Ending, as tonight will be mine. The next thing he knew, he was being wrapped in something from behind. Izuku put the last plate in the drying rack and proceeded to dry his own hands. Endeavor had left the sink after a few minutes to make a couple phone calls to Nizu about the students' late returns. As Izuku finished, a loud scream could be heard. In response, Izuku rushed out of the kitchen. As he got to the door, he noticed the others were already outside, minus Endeavor, who was behind him. The two ran over to the other four. Endeavor. What's going on? Is Natsuo okay? As he pushed past Izuku, he and the green-haired boy were able to see that Natsuo was on the ground, unharmed. The middle Todoroki child looked at the group. Natsuo. Sorry, I tripped. The boy stood up and dusted himself off. He sent one last look of anger at Endeavor before walking away. Bakugo. Well, that was bucking weird. Ashido. Yeah, I've never heard someone scream like that. I'm tripping. Fuyumi. Natsuo always was the loudest though. Todoroki. Yeah. Izuku didn't make a sound, but he watched as Natsuo walked away. It was then he noticed that the road was missing its white lines. Izuku walked over to Bakugo and tugged on his sleeve. Izuku. Ah. Bakugo. Yeah? What do you need, Deku? He turned around to see Izuku pointing at the road. He too noticed the missing lines. Izuku. Bakugo. Yeah, they were definitely there when we got here. Hey, Endeavor. The large man turned towards Bakugo and Izuku to see them both pointing at the road. Bakugo. Something's up. The road lines disappeared. Endeavor looked to find Bakugo was right. Endeavor. Weird. He walked out into the road and looked around. Endeavor. No one here though. Midoriya, can you smell or hear anyone hiding nearby? Izuku shook his head. The only thing he could smell was the fading scent of their dinner and the cold air. The only thing he could hear was distant cars in the city. Endeavor. I'll have someone investigate later. For now though, we should get you four back to UA. As he said that, their driver pulled up again. Ashido. I second that. I'm beat. She opened the back door and climbed in first. The other three students followed her lead and got in the car. Endeavor got in the passenger seat. Endeavor. Take us to the train. Driver. Of course, sir. Izuku closed the door of the extended dorm room Rumi, and the twins lived in. He noticed Rumi sitting on the couch they had, looking tired. He took off his shoes and walked over, climbing onto the couch and resting his head on her lap. She looked down at him. Rumi. Hey, babe. How was today? He gave her a thumbs up. Izuku. She chuckled. Rumi. Tell me tomorrow? He nodded. He looked to the door that led to the twins' room. Rumi. They did good today. Michikatsu didn't use his quirk at all. Yorichi was a bit more vocal today, but that's not that big a deal. Izuku smiled and sat up. He brought his hand up and touched her cheek. Izuku. Ah. Rumi put her hand over his. Rumi. I love you too. They shared a kiss. Rumi. We should get to bed. Come on. They both got up and walked to their room, ready to sleep. Outside, a winged figure floated outside the dorm window, looking into the twins' room. Hawks. I have eyes on the kids. President. Get them. Hawks. No. President. You don't get to disobey, you know what happens when you do. Hawks. I'd rather go to prison than die. President. And how would you die? You're the number 2 hero. Hawks. The demon brat can kill me by himself. If you had Mirko, his father, and an elite member of the Slayer Corps, which you refused to actually rank, I wouldn't make it 5 feet. Get me an actual opening. He turned off his comms and flew off, a hateful scowl on his face. Natsuo entered his dorm room late at night. He dropped his bag and just before it hit the floor, the room became covered in ice. Natsuo. That damned hero. How dare he think I need his help? And of course he brought that traitor with him. He lunged his frozen wall and started to bleed. His blood soon turned to ice. Slayers. It had been a few days since the Endeavor Agency work-study students had been invited to dinner at the Todoroki estate. Izuku slowly opened his eyes and sat up in the bed. He looked at his side to find Rumi had already gotten up. She was back in action as a hero after all. He got out of bed and quickly got dressed in his Yui uniform. He opened the bedroom door to find Yuzui on the other side. Yuzui, Midoriya. He grabbed Izuku by the arm, picked him up, and began to carry the boy under his arm. Izuku ra. Yuzui. Niza wants to see us. Izuku hit Yuzui in the back as the man carried him out of the dorm, to very little effect. As they passed by the common space, Yuzui walked past Hisashi, who was holding Yoriichi. Hisashi. Have fun, Izuku. Izuku sent him a small glare as Yuzui pulled open the front door and walked out of the building. After a few minutes of running, the two arrived at Niza's office. Yuzui proceeded to open the doors and walk in, putting Izuku down in front of Niza's desk. The rodent looked up from his computer as he heard the two enter the room. Nizu. Ah, Mr. Yuzui and Midoriya, right on time. Izuku looked at him with a curious look. Izuku. Ah? Nizu. I apologize, Midoriya, I don't quite understand you. I'll try and learn, but I have many responsibilities. Izuku then pulled out his phone, typed a sentence, and showed it to Nizu. Izuku, what do you want from us? Nizu. Straight to the point? Understandable, you two have responsibilities back at the dorms and as a student. I'll get right to it then. You remember the demon types with the numbered eyes? Izuku nodded and stepped forward, now very intrigued. Nizu then gestured towards Yuzui. Nizu. The Slayer Corps, the team of lethal heroes Yuzui here is a part of, have been investigating demon-type-related crimes, including old cases, for a few months now. They believe they've found a lead on whatever organization they're a part of. Izuku's eyes went wide and he slammed his hands on the desk. Izuku ra. Yuzui. Well, what's he all riled up about? Nizu. May I? Izuku nodded. Nizu. When Midoriya first encountered these demon types, the one called Jutaro mentioned the twins, though they hadn't been born yet. So as you could imagine, he has all the reason to be aware of any updates. Yuzui nodded. Yuzui. I see. Well, have no fear, Midoriya, me and the other flashy slayers will take care of these guys, no problem. Izuku looked at him and smiled. Nizu. I understand your abilities and how capable the Slayer Corps is, but be careful. It took Midoriya and a member of our Big Three, Tamaki Amajiki, to stop just one of them, and both of them are easily able to take on top pros. Yuzui. Understood, sir. I'll pass your warning on. Nizu. That's good. Now, Midoriya, I have one more thing to tell you. Izuku looked back at Nizu. Izuku. Ah? Nizu. Endeavor Agency has volunteered to aid the Slayer Corps in further investigations. Since the Corps is undoubtedly getting closer to the truth, this organization will most likely pick up the pace of their plans, which means becoming more proactive in fending off heroes. Endeavor will ask if you want to help, and I know you want to, but please think it over. Izuku nodded. Nizu. Good. Now you should be getting to class. Yuzui, resume your duties. Both Izuku and Yuzui nodded and left the office. Rumi was standing on top of a small 2-story building in the middle of the city, a couple hours away from Yue, and was tapping her foot on the ground in boredom. Rumi. Come on, where's the action? Muzurifu is more dangerous than this and Yue sits right next to it. She kicked a stone and sat down. Rumi. Not even a purse snatcher. It's not like the cold ever stopped crime before. As she sat there, waiting to hear even a hint of trouble, an empty tin can hit her square in the forehead, though it just bounced off. She looked below her to find an older man, probably in his 40s, glaring at her. Man yelling. Some hero, you are siding with those demon bucks like you, eh? An annoyed grin made its way onto her face. Rumi yelling. Do you want to come up here say that to my face, you punk? Man yelling. Punk? I older than you. Rumi yelling. Says the man too scared to fight a bunny girl. The man grunted and walked off, leaving Rumi to smirk and relax in victory over the common civilian. Rumi. Well, that just made my day worth it. Wonder what Izuku's up to. The next day. Rumi. You're gonna what now? She was standing in Endeavor's office with Izuku and Yuzui. Izuku. Ra. Rumi groaned. Rumi. I heard you the first time, I just want to make sure you know what you're doing. Endeavor. I talked it over with him earlier before you arrived. I went over all the risks I could think of and he still said he wants to do it. He wants to help the Slayer Corps. Rumi looked back at Izuku, a bit of worry on her face. She then sighed. Rumi. All right. She put her hands on his cheeks. Rumi. When you find those assholes, you kick their asses and come back safe, you hear me? Izuku smiled and nodded. Rumi. Good. They shared a kiss. Rumi then turned to Yuzui. Rumi. Could you do me a favor? Yuzui. Sure. Rumi. Keep that Agate-sama brat under control. Yuzui laughed. Yuzui. I'll try, but that girl gives me a run for my money in terms of flashiness. Rumi. What is with you? She shook her head, turned around, and walked over to the door. Rumi. Wanna get back, Izuku? Izuku. Ah. He caught up to her and they left, leaving Endeavor and Yuzui. Yuzui. She might kill me. Endeavor. I know. Wind and stone. Izuku was sat in the back seat of a car. He was sitting near a window with both Yuzui and Agate-sama in the back with him, and thankfully, Yuzui sat between the two students. Though Agate-sama was still peering over at Izuku every once in a while. They had been traveling for a couple hours. Both he and Agate-sama were in their school uniforms. Yuzui. So Midoriya heard you've picked up a sword. Izuku turned to look at the large, flashy man and nodded. Yuzui. Thinking of joining us? Izuku tilted his head in curiosity. Yuzui. Well, I'd say it's possible. You're strong and if you're given training, you could be nearly unstoppable. Izuku pulled out his phone. Izuku, I'd rather avoid killing if possible. You Slayers are all lethal, right? Agate-sama. Not at all, the Slayer Corps does all kinds of jobs. It's just that they don't shy away from doing what they need to stop strong villains. Yuzui. But it's still a big part of our overall image. There are ranks among us since in general, any heroes in our group are unranked by the commission. My rank, Hashira, has the least amount of people, but we're the ones sent on the most kill missions. Izuku, how many people have that rank? Yuzui. Only 9. Izuku, really? Why? Yuzui shrugged. Yuzui. Don't really know, never cared to ask anyway. All I know is that 9 is the average number. Some come and go, but the boss like to keep it a nice, and not so even 9. Izuku, and who is this boss? Agate-sama. That's who we're gonna go see, well, him and the other Hashira. Yuzui nodded and took note of the fact they were now driving through forest. Yuzui. Shouldn't be too much longer. He swatted away Agate-sama's hand as she tried to pat Izuku's head. Agate-sama. Come on. Yuzui. Nope. He sighed. Yuzui. Man, I miss my wives. Both students looked at him wide-eyed. Yuzui. What? Izuku. Ra? Agate-sama yelling. Wives? Multiple? 30 minutes later. The car pulled into a large gravel driveway off the side of the road. At the end was a small roundabout with a large estate at the end of it. The border walls were easily 20 feet high and made of stone. The front gate was just as tall and made from wood with decorative pieces of metal on it. The structure looked traditionally Japanese in architecture. All three got out. Izuku. Yuzui. Nice and flashy, right? Just screams, "Come and get me." It's hidden deep in the forest because, well, we get a lot of enemies. Let's go. He strolled over to the gate with Izuku and Agate-sama following him. He banged his fist on the gate. Yuzui yelling. Open up, my dazzling self can't stay out here, I've got a flashy new helper to introduce. After a few seconds both sides of the large gate opened up. The group walked inside and Izuku took note of his surroundings and the estate. The people who opened the gates wore similar tracksuits to Yuzui and Agatsuma, though the material itself was customized to fit the heroes that wore them. He smiled and waved at them. They didn't return the gesture. The estate sat on a large piece of land and appeared to be where wealthy landowners might have lived in several centuries ago. A single-story mansion with multiple smaller buildings at its sides. The ground was covered in stones and there was a koi pond in the courtyard. All in all, it was peaceful. Then Izuku fell flat on his face. He tried to get up but he couldn't move his legs. Actually, he couldn't feel them. Looking down at where they should be, he saw nothing beneath his knees. Did you seriously just let this thing in? Izuku felt someone pick him up by the back of his collar and lift him into the air. The same voice was suddenly right next to his head. Izuku, ah. He was facing Yuzui and Agatsuma. The latter reached for her sword, which she didn't have. Yuzui. All right, Shinazugawa, put Midoriya down. He heard the man speak again. Shinazugawa. Oh, I'll put him down all right. All of a sudden Izuku was thrown into the air. Now free, he regenerated his leg and spun himself around to get a good look at his attacker. A man with white hair wearing a black tracksuit with the front open, a white belt, and a white jacket. He didn't have a sword, so how did he cut Izuku? Sanemi, yelling, die. The air around the man's feet swirled around just before he jumped. Wind manipulation. The man wound his arms back like he was about to swing a sword, but there still was no blade. But Izuku wasn't about to take any chances. He lifted his hand near his neck and partially extended his own sword in an attempt to protect himself. The man swung and something made contact, sending Izuku backwards. Both landed at what Izuku estimated was 50 feet away from each other. Sanemi. So you have some tricks? You're still not leaving here alive. Yelling, whirlwind cutter. The air boosted Sanemi again as he began to spin at high speeds. He quickly became a cyclone of wind and stone. It was then Izuku spotted it. The thin line in the middle where Sanemi's arms were, as if everything in that one spot was getting cut, swept away. Sanemi was using sword made of air. Izuku equipped his own sword and ignited it. Izuku yelling, Ra! He crouched down and leapt at the incoming storm, planning to clash blades to stop him. Both rocketed towards each other at high speeds. For the two of them, it seemed like time slowed down as soon as a mere centimeter was left between them. For a fraction of a second their eyes met, and all Izuku could see was anger. Just before their swords clashed, as Izuku's flames began to mix with Sanemi's wind, something big, heavy, and very deadly landed between them. Both hit and bounced off of it, only getting to see that it was an oversized axe head before the owner pulled it back. Now is not the time to fight. Both heard a sound like wooden beads being rubbed together and looked to who spoke. The master will not be pleased.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.